And I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I didn't look up what holiday it is today, so it'll just be Fancy Sock Day. So we're going to go with board agenda approval.
Yeah, we have no public comment.
We don't, public,
What we usually do for board meeting, for a closed session, you always offer up a.
but, yeah, don't we do, okay. Is there, do we have any public comment? No. No employee organizations? Okay, then board agenda approval.
I'll move to approve the agenda as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Now communication, public comment, we did that. And now we're going to adjourn to closed session. And we're in Craig's office. Sorry.
We're good, folks.
Okay, we're back from closed session, and there is nothing to report from closed session. So we'll move into school board advance with the review of board protocol, and I believe that's Craig. Well, yeah, but you're leading us off.
Actually, I have to do this, huh? All right, so generally at every advance, we would review how are we doing on protocol, et cetera. The new board members here sat in on the old board members' last conversation around it, so it should not be news to you, the various areas of that are in the protocol and agreements for the board. And these are really, these are not laws or policies as much as they are just our agreements with one another as a team, as a governance team, to include the processes that EC and I go through relative to board meetings and just general governance as well. Note that those protocol are really, they don't really cover everything that we do, but they, over time, they just kind of capture what have been issues in the past that we formalize that we have to pay attention to. So it can be with some of these at some point, they come off of that list because usually those, they aren't the totality of how we operate, right? They're just trying to highlight some areas that might be of concern or that have been an issue or that we'd like to get better at. And so as we look at each section today, we may have nothing to say, and if somebody wants to say, do those really have to be in the protocol if they're covered somewhere else? For example, many of them reference board policies and other things, so this is our chance to, for the first time, this particular board, to come to our agreements, not the agreements that were made by other board members in the past, right? So that's our purpose right now, is to try to revamp them, and also, most critically, use it as a time to evaluate ourselves and self-reflect on how are we doing as a board? Are there things we could do better? How might we help one another be the best possible board we could be? Okay? So I think that's the intent. Do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that's great.
Okay. So my thought was we could just go through section by section. I don't know if we can actually get it up there. That might be good. Are you connected to this?
I have the cameras going.
Oh, okay. I could probably do that, huh? Through AirPlay? I'm sorry. I probably should have set that up. And I believe that Renee had a chance to get all this posted.
I can bring it up at the same time. You got it.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah, and so all of those attachments, you'll note that they're all the policies that are referenced within, and I thought that was a good opportunity for you to get, or bylaws really, for you to get your heads around. And then, the first one talks about ongoing communication, and it had highlighted continuing the Friday memo and the, but not wait to send out communications when critical things are happening. Do those all ongoing, and then and continue with the pre-board meetings. I don't know if these are things we have to do. Those are, it's up to you whether And are there any issues with those things? As you know, there are times when I don't get to the weekend updates, but I think generally it's been given, I've been given the ability to do that because you all know that I at times am a little bit busy. So, but with that, are there any thoughts, concerns, issues around communication in that way?
I'm really happy with the first and second bullet. I'd like to talk a little bit about the pre-board meetings and the purpose of them and how, what my thinking about the pre-board meetings is that that's an opportunity to get questions answered to not necessarily shorten, but to make our board meetings more efficient. I'm not sure that's happening, and I'm not sure that should be our purpose, because I'm hearing a lot of questions come out of board meetings that could have been answered in a one-on-one. So I just want to talk about that, what you guys think about it.
Could you say a bit more, Phyllis? I guess I've been using my pre-board, and Craig knows is I actually don't have that many questions, and I tend to actually use it as a one-on-one time to talk about longer-term things. So are you feeling that there are questions coming out in the board meetings that are not of interest to the board? Is that what you're sort of maybe saying?
Sometimes.
Okay.
Sometimes I think the clarifying questions are things that maybe others already know and don't need to be clarified. Sometimes, though, I know board members, and I do this, and I know all of you do too, sometimes you ask a question that you already know the answer to because you want the public to hear the answer to those questions. So those are all kinds of things that I just want to talk about. Is there a way to make our board meetings more efficient by using the pre-board in a different way or not?
Yeah, and I realize that the pre-board, I'm not sure it belongs in this section because in a way the pre-board is more about, toward the end, there's the board meeting agenda setting, communication on agenda items, et cetera. But there's also this, how do we operate? Because we didn't used to be meetings on Thursdays, right? And we shifted to a Thursday with the understanding we would still complete board agendas and post them by Friday to give a very long window up until Tuesday for you all to have devoured that, read it, send me your comments, et cetera, and then we can talk about some of them, all with the hopes of streamlining the board meeting itself. And to your point, I think possibly not having quite as many clarifying questions, and maybe this is, we need to talk a little just about clarifying questions and what does that really mean. And our intent is that they would not be the things that we would have talked about in closed session. They're really meant to be that guest is here, or we as a staff person, somebody is presenting something, and it's really, is there something they said you didn't understand? I need a little clarification on what that means, because if you actually had questions that might indicate you have concern, et cetera, I would hope we would have done that in the pre-board. But it's really, no, but I had a question about your presentation. Those are different things. And what we agreed on is that when you do an information presentation only item, if you actually have concerns or points or comments related to it that you want to raise, you add agenda setting, you say, I really want to bring that one back because I do have things I feel we need to talk about. But when we put it on information, it's there specifically because we think it's really just we are imparting knowledge. We want to make sure you understand it, not to make a point, not to go beyond. And you have the right to say, I really want that to be on the agenda, especially once we brought it as information. And then we can have a discussion about it, and we will plan accordingly that way. So I think that all these
So
are
when it's
tied to each
when
other.
it's a discussion item, it's of course broader and much more. I'm less concerned. I'm not concerned about the discussion items. I'm more wanted to talk about just what he talked about, the items that are not up for discussion, just up for making sure we all understand. Satish?
A little bit we are mixing up two things, I think, my view, right? I think one is either we are not very clear about this pre-board meeting agenda, what it is supposed to be doing. And are we considering this as an extension of the main board meeting or vice versa? Like means what I understand or probably I did not understand properly, is that like some of the items what we are supposed to be discussing here, it should have got done there and come only a little part of it only should be coming here. So one reason when a specific subject, when you're talking in a more bigger forum, is to get a little bit more different perspectives. Like, let's say, Sylvia or Jerry or Laurie, if they talk, probably I will also, that's how a group discussion is always, right? So you get a little bit more perspective about it, and your question could be different a little bit, right? In a one-on-one scenario, your questions could be like what you understood or what you did not understand. That's it. It'll be very much two people only talking each other, and it'll be really limited. When we talk in a bigger group, probably it will open up a little bit more, and that would help to clarify better. Okay, so that's, I think, the idea of having a discussion in a bigger group. And with the limited time, whatever we have with you, I don't think you have enough time to talk in detail about certain things. And because we pick up one point and we talk, and that's good actually. It's not like we are not making it effective, but probably there may be, if 9 items are there in the agenda, probably we will be picking 1 or 2 items and spending more time. At least I'm doing that. So what is to be achieved, then we need to define that in pre-board agenda.
Well, I think we just need to, I would like to make sure that we understand that there's a distinction between when it's a presentation and when it's a discussion. And to your point, Satish, when it's a discussion, I agree with you. Then it's totally broad-based. Everybody says what they think, offers their opinion. It's a discussion among us, which is another thing I want to talk about, is make sure we're talking to each other. But the clarifying questions part feels to me like it's taking longer than it should, and some of those clarifying questions, and I know we all do our homework, once you've read the deck that you get, some of those could be answered by Craig in your pre-board. But that's just me talking. I mean, I want to know what all you all think.
Can I give a little background to it too? Just and this was true in former districts where I was as well. That how did this all come about? And when I started on this board, there was very little distinction between it's an information item, it's a discussion, it's an action item.
We discussed everything.
Yeah, everything was discussed. It went on, and there was no clear protocol for how we operate. And so I think there was more issue at that time. And the truth is, this board operates quite well and respectfully, et cetera. So it's kind of a different time in some ways. But what I don't think we want to slip on is that notion of there's a reason we said if it's information presentation, no discussion, don't use clarifying questions to try to get a point across. It's truly, I just want to understand what you just said to me, and that's all. And which is why we sometimes, before we even discuss, we'll say, let's do some clarifying questions just to get those out of the way and just make sure, did we understand what was presented to us? That's its purpose, and it's not a backhanded way of getting a comment across, right? It's just, I want to understand it. And then discussions are, as we said, very open, maybe clarifying questions, but then we get to dive into it and have that conversation. Then it moves to action, right? So we're trying to be very deliberate in that, just so that it doesn't become sort of every item is out there and about, and we're here until 1 in the morning and all those sorts of things, right? So it's just a way of us holding ourselves to efficient meetings and understanding when things are a certain way. And if something is on information and you feel it needs to be a discussion, we'll put it on the next meeting. We'll just say, good, let's do that. Let's make it a discussion so that we can have that open discussion, all right? So I just wanted you to understand that history and how it gets there. And a lot of boards get there and they get confused and they're not diligent about this kind of an item. We're going to stick to the protocol around it and move on. So, yeah.
So we haven't heard from Lori or Sylvia. Do you have a comment?
So I think, sorry, short. I think part of what I may be trying to wrap my head around is, to a certain extent, I try to be very mindful of not interrupting staff's day, knowing how many balls are in the air and how few of you there are to run a district this big. And so in my mind, sometimes when an item is on the agenda for even a presentation, I know that a staff member is blocked for that period of time and is going to be there anyway. And to me, that is efficient to use that time to ask whatever questions I have rather than disrupt a flow. But what I'm hearing from you is you'd almost rather that I make a separate appointment with people to follow up with questions outside of a board meeting to keep the board meetings shorter, even if that does interrupt the flow of a day.
Yeah,
Am
or,
I-
again, the reason we stuck to Friday posting to give a lot of time, even though it's a Thursday meeting, which means we're posting several days early, and which is hard for us to do, the reason we do it is so you'll send me those questions or make them, I'll get it to a staff member. We will either come prepared to answer it at the meeting, or we'll send a message, and by the way, not just back to you, we'll send it to everybody, because they might have that same question. So that would be the protocol, so that when you get there, when it's a presentation information, all you are really asking in terms of clarifying questions are, I really didn't understand a certain thing. So in a sense, yes to what you're saying, but with a little slightly different take on it, that is the protocol we had set up. Now, that doesn't mean a board can't change that protocol.
Exactly.
But we had set it up that way to be efficient, so that by Tuesday, when we meet in person, and hopefully prior, I will have seen them. I will actually bring information. You know, Stacy told me the answer to your question is blank or whatever, or I will have sent an email back out to everybody, so that it doesn't have to happen there in the meeting. Otherwise, I do feel like, for me personally, why have a pre-board meeting? It doesn't help me if we're going to ask the same questions, basically, that would have been asked at the meeting. Now I've just added a pre-meeting with 5 of you that we're now covering it in a board meeting. So if we're going to cover it in a board meeting, then we should just eliminate the pre-board. That's my view on it. But I don't think that's what anybody wants. I like that time with you all. I just want to make it so that, and I should say that at the heart of all this is the things we put down for discussion in particular and discussion action are the ones we want to go deeply into, and I want time for it. And I want us fresh, and I want us, really digging into that, because those are the things we've decided. Those are the meaty items. The information stuff is really meant to be imparting stuff. It's not meant for dialogue. It's meant for, and if it's meant for dialogue, we're going to make it a discussion item.
Satish.
Come back actually after Sylvia maybe, but a quick one. So are we trying to streamline the board meeting agenda, or how it runs the board meeting, or the pre-board? Let's be clear. So let's not mix up both. What I mean is, as you said, we will not have clarifying questions for information kind of things, and only discussion and action we will do it here. And any clarifying questions on the information kind of things, let us see how we will take it separately. Not necessarily it has to be in the pre-board then, right? If it needs, like, for example, we need something from Allison, right, specifically.
Right, I would
So,
say that's correct.
yeah, so not necessarily that can be, or we can still discuss in pre-board, but probably not necessarily up to a level what we are thinking both ways, like we can get that information passed. So point to the, Lori, what she was saying, I think that's what similar thing I had, that is like you will have question to all 4 of them, let's say, in a different way. I know that quite a lot they can funnel through you, but still specifics would be there, or in the 4th bullet why it was, or things like that, right? So we would anyhow end up in talking to them separately, or we will have to, looks like. Because pre-board, we are trying to define 2 things, then it will be too hard. That's what my view. So if we are focusing on the board meeting, we will not have this in the board meeting. We will only do actions and the discussion. Fine. And we'll have to find a way to address that gap, whatever we were doing today in the board meeting. That pre-board may not be the right place, may not be. It may be great, then we don't have to disturb them. But I doubt with the 45 minutes time what we have, how much you would be able to cover the complete agenda, going to a quick one and all those stuff.
I'm not sure personally that I 100% agree, but I agree that, and I was saying this up front, I'm not sure this is in the right place as a communication thing, but there is something about it that, for example, if we just had them called and are check-ins with board members, but it's not about pre-board meeting, right? But as a pre-board, it is tied to the board meeting. Otherwise, we wouldn't call it pre-board, because it's there for that purpose. And I don't want to lose that opportunity to meet with each of you. But I agree with you that that's actually a different thing from how does the meeting run efficiently, when do you ask questions and all. I'm just saying, and in fact, in my last job, we didn't do pre-board meetings. with everybody. We never did it because everything was done. You review the material, you send me your questions by Tuesday. I will respond. If we want to talk, we'll set up a meeting, we'll talk. But we didn't have that set up. I prefer having a set time with each of you because for me, that's better. But in a way, it's not really just about the board meeting. So in a way, I agree with you. We have to separate what are the issues we're trying to address here. And I think one is efficiency of board meeting is a part of what you were raising, I think. And then there's the other one about, how do we use the pre-board, but it's really tied to the whole cadence of how we agree to do something in terms of when it's posted, how you ask the questions about it, and then how that leads to a good, efficient board meeting.
When you say efficient, is that another word for shorter? Because I actually agree with a lot of what Lori was talking about. It seems to me to be less efficient for the staff or cabinet members to meet with us to go through these. Because for me, a lot of times the presentation, the written, there should be, I like to see more, I have informations just based off of the slides, and I could ask those during pre-board, but some of these questions I feel like are ones that, if I were a parent, I'd be interested in knowing also. I do try to keep, I do try, I don't always succeed, keep myself to 2 or 3 questions because I'm cognizant on time. And so I just want to, I guess, assert that I think what we're doing feels efficient. It may not lead to a short public meeting, and if that's what we want to optimize for, I'm all in. We could, figure out how to do that. I'm just not sure. Yeah, I guess a lot of what Lori's talking about
Yeah, and I guess
resonate with.
I'll second everything Jerry just said, and also say I don't know that I am all in for a shorter meeting. I feel like, no secret, I watched a lot of different board meetings from a lot of different districts getting ready to do this, and we're a big district, and there are big meaty topics we need to talk about, and in a lot of ways, we're way more efficient than other large school districts in terms of our meetings don't typically go to 1 a.m. and there are plenty of districts out there, that are larger that they do. So, I don't know, in a way, I'm struggling a little bit with the concept of efficient and shorter being synonymous when sometimes being, I guess I feel the weight right now of being diligent as well as efficient, and I get that that may sometimes take time.
Yeah, I just want to clarify, I never defined efficiency as shorter. That was not what I said in any
okay.
way. For me, efficiency.
So that's a hearing problem on my part.
So efficiency for me is we're making sure to use our precious time together to most deeply get into the items that we want to get into. And in order to do that, we come to meetings prepared, which means if I have that information by a Tuesday, staff can bring it so community does hear the items that you're raising that you think should be there. But if I'm hearing something kind of for the first time, or it wasn't raised even in a pre-board, which has happened, that people are bringing in, well, now we're not prepared. And that's not efficient, right? If your real goal is not, it isn't about any of us being the one to raise it or to, that's not what it's about, but it's really about, we want to make sure we have a good conversation and we want all the information out there and we want community to hear it. The best way you can do that is make sure that I know way ahead of time, so all the staff will make sure to bring that so everybody hears it, not just you in the pre-board, but everybody hears that.
I can't speak for everybody, but I know if I am ever, I don't want to say guilty, but if I ever do that to you, it will largely be because it dawned on me in the meeting, right? I mean, so there are
Yes.
going to be times
Always.
where you can't.
Happens to all of us.
Right? I mean, it's.
Yeah, and to me, that's the nature of good. We're having a good conversation or got some good information and it triggers something. And I want to save our time for that, not because it's shorter, but because we're saving it for the important stuff that I feel, but I do feel that sometimes, and I'm not just talking frankly here, but in my lifetime in this career that I've been doing, we often get into conversations about the things that end up being, that wasn't really the meaty topic, right? And so I do want to save our energy for, and I will say going to 1 a.m. And stuff, even though we're not doing that and everything, but when you get into that area, you're not being efficient, meaning having a good conversation that is efficacious for us in our role in the precious little time that you have to talk to one another. And you said you wanted to talk to that a little bit. But it's not about putting a lot of time into the information items and things like that and asking a lot of questions, because I want you to dive in and bounce off of one another, your ideas, and listen and say, I hadn't thought about it that way. What if we? Right? Those are the kind of things we ought to be doing, and I want our community to see us doing so they know we debate and dialogue and care deeply about all of these matters. So it's not about shortening it. It's about having the conversations that best compel us and move us forward as a governance team. That's my view on it.
So some of the things that have come up on information meant for more of that, it's not one way, but you know what I mean by one way in terms of it's mostly supposed to be
Yeah.
reporting rather
Imparting
than.
information.
Okay, maybe
Yes.
imparting is, thank you, that's probably a better word. Are things that I think we hear about from the community, right?
Right.
There are topics that have been brought on information that then, that's the thing that somebody's been chewing on you, or multiple people have been chewing on your ear for, even years in some cases
Right.
for some of these things for some of us. So what protocol would you like us to, if we're not involved in agenda setting and the first time we see it is when it's been labeled as information and we know that,
Then
gee, I
you
really
bring it
wish this
back.
had been agendized as discussion.
Then we bring it back.
Right, we bring it back.
Someone on
yeah.
the board says, we need to talk about this, let's bring it back, and it comes back on the next agenda as a discussion item.
And hopefully sometimes if you have these things that your people have been kind of coming at you with, hopefully you will have raised it on agenda setting and said, something that's been coming up in community is ABC, can we agendize that? And then we would agendize that, right? Or if it's something that you forgot that people had been noodling or, bugging you or talking to you or it's been on their mind about it and it comes first time as an information item, yes, you would use, that's why, actually this district did not used to have an agenda setting thing on there. We put it there for that exact reason, to say that if ever you have something like that, you bring it up in agenda setting so that we will agendize it. That's the purpose of that item.
So does that raise your comfort level, Lori, or not so much?
I'm going to struggle with this one, but I'm happy to go with where everybody would like to go. I will
So
do my best to go with where everybody
Are we
goes with
most
it.
comfortable leaving it the way it is now and revisiting this when you have time to think about it? I'm not sure where to go from here.
I think for me, I'm comfortable with this if you're good with, because I hadn't really thought about bringing things back as discussion items. I think I understand what you're getting at is you want to have very distinct two classes or multiple classes of agenda items.
Exactly.
Some you just want to go through and some you want to, and I'm good with that. I think some of the informational ones I do want to discuss, and if you're comfortable and we're able to bring those back in 2 weeks or whatever, I'd certainly be good with that. I think I can see the advantage of this is it gives staff better predictability on how much to load on each, because these are light ones, these are heavy ones. So from that predictability standpoint, I can see how we make the system work better. So, yeah, I could go with this myself, but I'll be bringing things back.
Absolutely, I hope so. I absolutely hope so, yeah. Sylvia, do you have anything you want to add, or are you okay? Are you?
I have no clarifying questions.
Well said.
I think probably a request to staff that take out the last slide in questions. Okay, for most of the I think Jerry, alluded right way. The differentiation between the information and the discussion items are not there clearly to be.
But clarifications.
Yeah, but we say it's even though we put it in two different buckets here, but we end up in doing the same way both, to be frank. And or like you sometimes caution us, say this is only for the information, not no actions or no discussion needed. We can. So I think probably you need not answer any questions maybe. Like now ends up happening is like any questions like kind of, and obviously and we are curious and we'll ask questions, and maybe make it a point that there's no discussion on this anymore. Like it is just hey, listen this and come back. That's it. And where do we say that we need to bring it back? When do
Under
we say-
agenda setting, or at the time.
At the time?
At the time.
Yeah, you can't say that
You
when
could
it's
say it
over.
right
I
at the
hope we can
time. At
bring
the
this
end,
back.
you could say that we need more discussion on this, it needs to come back. Craig writes it down, I write it down, it comes back.
Well, and honestly, when you see it on, as an information item, and you know that's something we ought to be talking about, you send me a message right away. You just say, by the way, glad to see this on information. I'm going to want to have a discussion about it at the next meeting,
helpful.
and then we'll do it, right? I
Yeah.
mean, you have the right to ask for something on the agenda at any moment in time. You don't have to wait or anything, but we purposefully put it on agenda setting on the agendas every single time in case something comes up in the meeting and you say, you know what, I actually think we need to discuss this more, and then we'll place it on the, so we're trying to be really good about always considering the things that are coming up that we need to talk about along the way. Yeah.
I'm anticipating a lot of such things will become discussion items in the future, because that also become an efficiency issue then. Because today, information thing with a limited discussion, probably that will be done. When
And
you're
to
bringing
Lori's
back
point,
again, yeah,
to
again
Lori's point, I think
you're,
that's a
you
good
know,
thing.
You're grinding again.
Right.
Right.
So
And that's
I
good.
see a distinction, and Craig can correct me if I'm wrong, but on an information item, I see that as the board communicating with the staff. You have questions about whatever they presented, they answer your questions, end of story. On the discussion items, the five of us should be talking to each other, and I don't think we do that really well. I think we do a lot of talking to the staff, but I don't think we do as good a job as we could of talking to each other. And that's what happens during discussion. So, that's another piece of the distinction that I would like for all to be a little more clear about and maybe practice it a little more. So what do you think about that?
Agree.
Okay.
And something we need to work on a little bit too, or just do you agree we should be, or, because I
We should try this out, like probably, if this works, we can always again one more advance, we can change it
Right.
if needed.
Yeah.
Let's keep it for some time and see that how it works, and only thing is, as I was saying, that it should not be inefficient more, like, you know, now
Not
we're
be
trying
what?
to be more efficient, we
Oh.
do not want it to be more,
And
or less efficient.
it might not be shorter, which is fine.
No,
But
short is
hopefully
one,
it will
but
be,
even that bringing back and 2 times representing and 2 times talking and some other things, oh, we already clarified, something like that. It's okay,
Right.
I think we can try it out, but we have to, you know,
and I use as an example the math pathways. Remember how many times we brought that back? I mean, it was on the agenda like 3 or 4 meetings in a row for discussion, which was great. I mean, that's what we should do when it's a high visibility, potentially contentious topic. Yeah.
Yeah, I do think that it'd be interesting. I haven't gone back and looked at tape and things, but it would be interesting to see what is our body language when we get to a discussion item, because the intent is that some information comes at that time, but then the board turns to itself and just looks at one another. You don't worry about audience or staff or anybody right there, and you're talking to each other. But we still kind of use it as we're talking to the audience, we're talking to, and if you take a look, I think you'll see that some of the comments you're making aren't really to one another, but are somehow to staff or other people. You guys, the Brown Act keeps you from having a good conversation just about anywhere, anytime, except for at these meetings. That's your time to understand one another, really, right? It's a really important time.
I totally agree, and what's running through my head is the room setup makes it really
Could be,
hard
yeah.
to do that, right? Where I'm sitting, I can see Phyllis well and I can see Jerry well, but with the curve, I can barely even make eye contact
Right.
with Satish and Sylvia, right? Yeah, exactly, right? So it's hard with the, and I like your idea of being more conscious about literally turning ourselves to face each other.
Yeah. That's what I used to do when I was on a board. I would just
yeah,
physically turn myself and say.
But then
"I'm
I
gonna
put
do
my
that."
back to Phyllis, right? So it's
Oh, that's okay.
and to you.
Oh.
But you know, that's what's running through my head is I'm quite sure if you watch tape back, we're not. And then what are the barriers to that? And it seems to me that sometimes the setup that does lend itself to the information
true.
receiving ones does not lend
Yeah.
itself to the discussion
Yeah, we
ones.
struggle as staff. We
Yeah.
struggle with that. How do we set the room? It's just really hard in this room with the
Yeah.
things we have. We don't have
I know the constraints aren't helping
stable
us. Yeah.
dais that is set up exactly the way we want. But that's something we should consider. Yeah.
I would just second that also. I think, you know, if I think about, for instance, the Cupertino City Council chambers, there's enough space in the curvature, because I'm the one sitting in the middle, and I actually do feel that I can't hardly see Sylvia. and so forth. I know we're limited here in the room, but I 110% agree with what Lori said. Maybe we could put some thought into maybe spreading out that curvature a little bit more so there's more distance. You can actually see better if there's more distance. So, but the comment's very well taken. I think we do spend a lot of time. I'm certainly guilty of it myself, of speaking to the audience because I can see them. They're right there.
Right, yeah.
That's where you're pointing.
Right, and it's hard for me to see some of my other board members, and so that's something we should improve on.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we're ready to move on to whatever's next in the protocols.
Well, and I don't know that we need to speak to all of them. Board member visits to schools, I think is, the way we're set up now is good. I don't know, I might need to change that to reflect our current practice. I'm not sure if it's different, is it? I don't,
Well, it's just that we each have the 5 assigned now, and
Right.
so
right,
we
so.
don't arrange them all with the superintendent's office
Right, so
anymore.
I'll change that to reflect what we are doing, and again, we'll always reflect on these, and if we want it, because we said we're trying something out, we might want to change that, then we can still change it, but I'll change that to capture what we are doing, okay?
So this is a discussion, right? Are the school visits working for everybody? Is everybody good with that?
I think so.
The visiting the 5, yeah?
Yeah, I think so.
Is there something? that
No,
you're
no, no,
thinking
I'm
of?
just
Oh,
curious,
okay,
like, it's
Right.
been working for me,
Yeah,
so
it's
I'm
been
curious
working,
if it's
yes.
working for all of you.
I actually like it because there's an opportunity to do a deeper dive than if I had to run through 25 schools. So, in fact, thank Dr. Baker for this idea. I actually feel like it worked better than what I was thinking doing originally, which is just touch all 25 schools. So,
So
I like
think
it
brought
too.
up to you,
Yes,
so, yeah, when
I was
is
gonna
the-
ask
the
that.
rotation starts, like, let's say we complete our, is it like end of this academic year? That is like starting September, are we going to get a new set of schools, or end of the calendar year we are going to get it?
Yeah, my gut was, when Satish asked me that, I said, normally we do it in the December, January timeframe, but since we've now tied it to doing the SIPSAs and all of those things, it might be better to start the school year with that new set of schools so that you can go through the full process of the year with them. So, so the nature of it changed a little when we tied to it that portion, and I think I would recommend doing the next round of schools and making a school year. And I know that's a little strange because you just barely got started with the set you have, but maybe we need to reset ourselves so that it's on a school year basis. That's my thought.
I think school year makes more sense.
I think so too, especially if we're gonna have shifts in, staff over the summer and thing like, it would make sense to start with the same staff person and stick with them for the.
Right.
So only
The
the
arc
first
of the
year we are
year.
going to have this problem because we have only 3 months practically. We
I
start
know,
from
yeah.
February, and by May you're done, kind of, right? So next year we would get more time, but I was suggesting, Craig, even like, like probably next year if somebody wants to do more visits also, because who could not do in this 3 months enough, we can do that a little bit, but we can probably rotate, and so that we can seriously work with specific schools.
And I'm finding, I like that right now, at this time of year, our focus, we had a specific thing we were going for, right? We were all going for the SIPSAs, so we were all having the same conversations, and I think when that comes before us, we'll have that common purpose that we can discuss, and it's already come out a little bit in activity reporting. So maybe there would be something in the fall and in the winter that we could define, like yes, go and visit your schools, but also maybe have a common purpose that links us all together at those periods of time for a similar conversation going on across the 25 schools. Anyway.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, and I think there are lots of things we could talk about doing. We've got curriculum adoptions out there. We've got following.
TSS.
Right,
SEL,
yes, so it's a lot of stuff that we could make a decision about if we were going to have a focus. Yeah, I think that's good.
So I don't think I need to read all these. Did anybody have thoughts on either board member questions to superintendent staff, those 2 bullets, or complaints issues brought to board members from community? You want to read those? How about those
Are
2
you-
set 5 bullets? Is there anything we should discuss?
With the bullet that's board members may contact executive cabinet directly, but should also CC superintendent, totally comfortable with that. Are you comfortable, especially with these curriculum ones, if we know there's a director who is the point on math and science, are you okay if we treat that like we CC both Allison and
Yeah,
Marie,
exactly.
or Allison and Lynn along with you?
Yes, yeah, and
Okay.
they all know that if they feel like they should check in with us, they would do that, and I think.
Yeah, I mean, we're
regular-
still CCing both of you, right? But
Right.
if we know that's the point person with the go-to
Yes.
information.
Yeah, the only time it's a
Yeah.
problem is if it's without the CC, because then
Oh, no,
staff
yeah.
are confused about, well, who's directing my work, and we don't want that, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So yes, thank you for asking that. Anything else there? Or on complaints, issues brought to board? That all makes sense, those three bullets there, okay. When, how board members receive agenda items? I guess we take out keep the status quo, because, of course we will, because we're doing it. That's what we do. Yeah, so you emailed your questions to me, but you don't have to wait for pre-board, superintendent. Oh yeah, and then my thing is that I have to judge whether that question is really a direct personal kind of one, you to me, or that benefits the entire board, and in which case I will send, and you see me do that, I say in response to a question, a board, and I don't identify who, for Brown Act and other reasons, I just say, here's some questions that have been asked that I wanted everybody to see, and I send them out to everybody, and I try to do that so everybody is on the same page. And of course, no replies back and forth on those things. And that's true in general, by the way. I just want to make sure that that you all know that if we send out information that is, one way for you to have information, make sure we don't have any back and forth on it, because that would be a violation of the Brown Act. So,
I do have a question actually about
Uh-huh.
sorry, if you scroll back down, so I'm just curious for the rest of the board. So I know, like, if a parent emails all of us, Phyllis is the one that does the response, but then do you guys what do you do?
The only time I've been doing the responses is when Phyllis has been traveling. So the couple of times I've emailed you all and just have put the one statement, I'm responding this week for Phyllis, it's just been because she's been traveling. But otherwise, if it's a normal week and I know Phyllis is responding, I don't respond.
Okay. So you just don't acknowledge the
Unless it
email at
comes
all?
only to me, in the header, and then oftentimes I'll check in with Craig and say, do you know if everybody got a copy of this or just me? Do I reply, or is Phyllis replying for all of us?
That's a great idea. Sometimes we may not.
can't hear
Most
you.
of this in nature.
Use the mic.
Most of this in nature, we think that is for everybody, okay, because the type of questions, what it is. But sometimes it will be hard to differentiate whether it is addressed to me alone or to the board, even though my name is there, right? So that's where I think one confusion. But we all, invariably, we had some discussion here, so we at least last 2-3 months, what are, these kind of things popped up for everybody. So it is. And when you respond, you copy us or no?
I do not.
You do not.
No, I do not.
Any reason for that?
It's been our protocol.
Yeah,
We
no,
can
I
talk
just,
about it.
because
Should
the-
I? be
no,
I mean,
not
I
to-
could.
Just to be, a consistency or being the same page, that's it.
I would maybe just add a +1 to that if it's having a BCC to us, both so we know that it's been responded to and what was said, so that we're all on the same page
That'd be
in
great.
terms of
Yeah.
that
I
message.
would love that.
Because someone should not see us on the way, I never got a response on this.
Yeah.
Then we'll have to check and tell you, that's not a,
Yeah, no, I think it's a great idea. I'm not sure BCC is the right way. And in some ways, as long as council says, and you all understand you are not to respond after that, I think it might be better actually CC so that
Yeah.
person
So
knows
that
person
that
knows.
that the whole
Yeah.
everybody
board saw it.
got it.
I always CC Craig,
yeah, maybe that's what the protocol is, but I thought this would be more.
but I'm happy to CC everybody if that's what you'd
Yeah,
like.
because we do not want to hear a different thing. Well, no, we sent many mails, no response. And
Right.
kind of, right? So they can lie, so.
Well,
Yes.
and if there was ever a time when you needed to give a response that wasn't, I mean, most of the time, the responses that we're giving are super high level, thank you for your input, not
Right.
really.
Yeah.
Not
ans-
offering
not
opinions
really
or anything,
answer-
right?
We can't really answer the question, because 99% of the time, it's stuff that really is either for staff to answer or
Right.
is something that's gonna be coming for, you know, a discussion,
Right.
so.
But it's good because that person then knows that still
Yeah.
everybody's in the loop. And so I like that. We just have to look at the nuance of that from a Brown Act perspective. I actually think it is totally fine as long as everybody knows you just don't respond from that point on. I do also want to say that it isn't that it's not okay to acknowledge something. So Phyllis, we should talk about that a minute. So Phyllis officially responds for the group, but sometimes you have relationships with people who are sending you things, everything, and it's fine, I think, to just say, got your message, you know, as per our protocol, you know, board president will be responding. I appreciate hearing from you, and leave it at that. I think it's okay to do that. Just don't give any substance, because the reality is you have a relationship with people, and we know that. So it's not, you must not respond in any way. Just make sure if you do, it's just an acknowledgement of having received it and what our protocol is. You can do that. And I'm pretty sure we can CC response to everyone, but we'll check with legal on that and make sure.
You'll let
Okay.
me know.
Yeah.
If we're sending an acknowledgement because of a personal relationship, like the example you just gave, do you still want us to CC you, even though we're not CCing the group on that? If we're saying, you know, acknowledging I'm seeing this, is that important for us to CC you on, or is that just?
I don't know that's important. You should do what feels right to you. Because again, sometimes I think it is, you have a personal relationship with,
Yeah.
and it's not so much about whether I'm copied or not.
business
I
of the
think,
district, yeah.
I trust people's judgment on that, as long as you're staying away from responding for the board. You know, that's the main thing, that only the president gets to do that. Yeah. Okay. All right, so where were we then? This must be fascinating conversation for these guys. Okay, so the collective bargaining one.
I have a sort of a related question. So are we permitted, so I certainly understand we don't speak for the board and with, not being president, we're not involved in that, but is it permissible to say have coffee with someone like Kai or Lisa? Or is it, that is okay, right?
But you would just let me know.
Just
you're
let
doing
him
it.
know,
Alright,
yeah.
Okay, all right, I just want to make sure. that's
Absolutely,
protocol.
yeah.
All right, thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so this one was about, so whose job was it to, if we're not following our protocol, let's say at a meeting or wherever, and I think the agreement with the last group was, well, that's a collective thing, don't only put it on me or board president, but if you feel like, you know, this is only an information item, but we're getting into a discussion, that anybody can raise that and, you know, give point of order, can we stick to, or whatever, that we help each other with all of this. Yeah, make sense? All right, which one is next? Oh, the wait to be acknowledged by president, is that working for folks? I know that the last board found that was important, instead of people just jumping in, and you guys do a great job of that. You pretty much always
Absolutely,
look to
yeah,
Phyllis,
everybody
and
looks to me.
Just
It's
want to make
great,
sure that
yeah.
works for everyone. Okay.
And I think it's important, not just because I think we all want everybody to have an opportunity to have their say, so, yeah.
Okay. So, I think the talking to each other obviously is so guided by the Brown Act, and I did wonder, in terms of person-to-person conversations, do you have any lingering questions about that? And okay.
There have been some questions about what we can and can't do in terms of more than two people getting together, like social events and stuff are fine. And we could even, 3 of us or 4 of us could even go out to lunch together if we wanted to, as long as we didn't talk about board stuff. I just worry a little bit about the optics on that. If people see you at Lazy Dog, 4 of us together having lunch, it probably is not wise, even if we're not talking about board stuff. So, yeah, but we haven't done that, so I think that's fine. We could, you're right.
Great. So any thoughts about staff, interacting with them, et cetera? You know, I certainly.
Well, they're so hard to get along with.
I know, yeah. But especially when you're reached out to by others, yes, absolutely, you're free to follow up. I think our new protocol might be a little bit different in that regard, since you have a set of 5 in particular that you're that you're connected with, so that might change the nature a little bit on this. Then there are some noted ongoing meetings of board president and vice president meeting with.
Met with CEF.
We haven't met with CEF.
Do
We
you
met
wanna do
with the
that?
union people, and we decided we would do that 3 times a year,
mean-
once a trimester.
We've been seeing CEF so much in the strategic
Right.
partnerships and 25 kind of, but maybe we should just
I
make
think it's a good
an
idea for us to
appointment
do it. We just haven't done it
to do
yet.
it separate outside of the business stuff
Right.
and really just do a
Yeah.
check-in? Okay,
Yeah.
so
I
let's
think
get
that's a good
that.
idea.
So I'll
Okay.
set that up.
Especially now, I mean, we're going through so many changes and working very hard on partnership with them, and, yeah.
Okay.
On that last bullet about CUSD affiliated function, so I was wondering if you could say a bit more about, would a PTA meeting be considered a CUSD affiliated function, for instance? Is it?
It would,
it
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
all right.
And so I don't remember why this one's on there, honestly.
I don't either.
I don't know what's behind it.
I want to say when it came up at a previous protocol meeting, it had to do with speaking at a, like an association, like
Right,
maybe Asian
that's
American
right.
Parents
Oh, right.
Association.
There was some question about where board members should or should not be speaking. And that was why the check-in with you. And I think it's probably a good idea,
Yeah.
even, I don't think
Oh,
we've.
yeah, I remember that now,
Yeah,
yes, yeah.
yeah.
Part of it was for messaging and just making sure that we're clear on what is okay to represent from the board perspective, because we talked about it and here's what we got to, versus making sure it's your own opinion and being clear on which of those. So I think it was actually meant as a help to a board member going to talk at a PTA or a Rotary or whatever, that if you've been asked to do that, that you feel comfortable with which things you're representing as the district and board versus your role as a citizen, et cetera. So I think it was more like that. So again, board president or soup generally responds to media.
I'd like to, I have a question about that one. So I certainly understand the president and the superintendent representing the district and the board. Does this prohibit us from talking to media? It's one of the, it doesn't, right?
No, and I would say that I think that everything on this list of protocol and agreements are not prohibitive. They are understandings about how we will operate and agreements that we have with one another, which is, you will sometimes be approached by the media or whatever, and I think, you'll use your judgment, because we don't actually have a right to say you're not allowed to talk to media, right? That's not the way it is. So I think and I think people have been talked to by media that aren't on the list, and it's in the paper, and that's fine. That's it's just that we have to be careful more about the representing the district
Representing
aspect
the
of it.
district, right. But if
Yeah.
we're asked about our own opinion, that's, because because if you look at Board Policy 9010, the one dealing with public statements, that clearly allows members of the board to respond to media. So I'm thinking the fact that it's here is highlighting the fact that the board president represents the board, as opposed to only the board president.
Right.
talks to media.
Yeah.
Just wanna make
I
sure
interpret
that's-
the same way you
Okay,
do.
okay. And then the third bullet is another one that I had a question about. Basically, board members may respond to email and will copy the superintendent. Do you really want a CC of every email we write to people? Or is that because I haven't been CCing you on every email I write, so I know.
I don't personally have an issue with it at all. I don't. I'm just wondering if there's anything broader in terms of agreements that could be problematic, but I don't know.
I think it's up to you whether you want them or not. I think that was put on there because there was an issue about some emails that were being sent that were maybe bordering on, I don't want to say inappropriate, I don't know what word I want to say, but that was the time that we put this protocol on.
I'm happy to revisit any time, but right now, I trust the four of you implicitly to use your
Absolutely.
discretion, and
And I
That's
think
right.
it's up to Craig, yeah.
Yeah, I feel that too. I'm not concerned with it at all. So is that something we should remove, you think? at this time, and then if it becomes an issue, we'll talk about it again.
I mean, just individual board members can use discretion, or
Yeah.
when responding to emails,
Yeah,
we'll use discretion.
discretion when, yeah.
When CCing the superintendent, if it's something he needs to be soup in the loop on. I mean, I don't know what
Right.
the
Okay,
wording is, but
okay. Do that then. Everyone in agreement with that? That makes sense?
I just, when I read it, I wasn't sure if the emphasis was on the copying the superintendent part, or is it not copy other board members? I don't know if that was something that said, when you respond to email, please don't CC your other board members. That one makes sense. That first one, I just wasn't sure, just because it seems, I guess, unusual, but I understand.
Yeah, so we could make
Okay.
2 bullets.
Yeah.
One that's individuals will use discretion
Yeah.
when blah, 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 and another one that's about when responding directly, do not CC other board members.
Yeah.
Yeah, got it,
Just a
got it. Yeah.
clarifying question about that.
Yeah.
But, so, we can't CC all the board members because that would be violation of the Brown Act? But if all the board members are in that thread, isn't that okay? Because then it's not just 2 or 3 people?
Well,
Wait.
no, because it's not posted as a conversation, right? It's not
Okay.
and that's where it gets dicey, and the truth is, if you did it once, probably it's not a problem, but the reality is, for you to now track whether you happen to have a side conversation with Jerry about a similar topic, but everybody else has been in it, now all of a sudden you have this issue where you've been put out something in response to someone that may be decided at some point in a board meeting, and you've included other board members. It's really, frankly, it's more a protection for you than anything else in terms of the Brown Act. You don't want to tie your hands in general to, now that I've put something out, who am I allowed to talk to about this or not? So it's a protection for you to just say, okay, good, I can have that with that public, but by not involving your colleagues, you haven't put yourself in a position where you have to be worried about who is that one person I will talk to, and can I now talk to anybody about it because I actually responded with content. Now, again, that isn't the same as responding with an innocuous thank you for writing and acknowledgement. That's different. That's fine. But if it's content that we may decide sometime in an open session, it would constitute that you have raised it with your colleagues at some time in a non-posted way for something that will be decided on later. Now, the chances of that ever actually getting you in trouble are really, really slim, but I recommend that it is the law, and we just really, I urge you to live by it just because it'll make your life easier, frankly.
And we know that we have community members that watch us.
Yes.
I would just, if it helps, the way that I categorized those in my head in the beginning was who I was receiving the information from. So think about it from the receiver standpoint. Like, if you're receiving it from a member of the public, you can't control that. If you're receiving it from one of the 4 of us, we should all know better, right?
Yeah,
Um,
okay. That's helpful.
Okay, so we talked quite a bit, I think, about most of this agenda setting and communication. Keeping the agenda setting on there, that's why it's there.
One of the things I would like to just mention is the bullet 2. We have not been doing that. The president, I've been meeting
Oh,
with
yeah.
Craig by myself to set the agenda. And I like it better, and the reason I do is because, 2 reasons. Number 1, if Lori and I both met with him, I couldn't talk to any of the rest of you about anything on the agenda, and I like the opportunity to be able to do that. And the second thing is, I think we've made it really clear now that any of you can put anything on the agenda anytime you want, which hasn't been the case in the past. So I think that lessens the necessity for 2 of us to meet with the superintendent. So just a comment, if you would prefer to go back the other way, I'd love to hear about it.
Just a clarification, do you mean any of us can request for an item to be placed or place an item? There's a difference, right?
Well, it would,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's a good question.
Right.
I was going to say, it is request, but at a board meeting, the reason we have it on the agenda set, and we have that there is so that we can actually check in too and say, do other people want that? So it is true that if one person wants it but nobody else wants to discuss it, it is
Right.
our discretion essentially to say, well, nobody else put that forth, and so unless we hear otherwise, we're not going to worry about that one at this time or whatever. Generally speaking, though, the truth is, if any one of you raises it, we generally put it on. I
Yeah,
mean,
we
that's
do, yeah.
that's just the way we do it. But that's why it's on the agenda, is because we can do a check-in. Because it's agendized, it's okay for us to say, is this something that people do want to see on there? And we usually check in on that. So please use that time, I guess is my point, is that there's a reason we added it to the agenda, that and many, many, many boards do that for that very reason, so we can check in on with one another. Yes, we should put that on. Okay.
Is there any, I think sometimes I find myself waiting for the agenda to post on Friday, but there's, kind of that wondering in the week between meetings as to what I want to start thinking about, but not knowing what I want to start thinking about. And is there a way to, the year at a glance calendar is helpful, but it's not quite as specific as some of what we wind up receiving. Is there a way that once you know for sure, or pretty for sure, that something's coming, that there could be a middle layer between that big picture year and the actual final agenda that kind of says, start thinking about this for this week?
Interesting.
Draft agendas, do they have access to
Right, but I think
those?
she's saying in a timely way, and for people to know that, oh, that item, and it has to have enough clarity that you know what it's about, so that you
Right.
can
I mean,
think
I
even a
might
month ahead, because it's
I-
on
I
year
might
at a
go start
glance.
digging on the website and looking at, the board policy that goes along with it, or I might, in my, scrolling through my inbox of, journals that I get, if, I might look at an article differently and think, ooh, that one's I'm gonna make sure I read that this week because I know that that's coming. I mean, I don't know, there are times where I feel very, floating in between, where I don't feel like I have a focus, but I have time to maybe focus on something, and
Yeah, we can, I think, if you don't mind, let me think about
Yeah,
that
yeah,
a little
that's
bit, how
totally
to, because I know you've all been very conscientious of not adding a lot more to staff in order
Yeah.
to, so let me think if there's a way to make that happen with that advance notice. I would say that it is one of the reasons that we try to do the cadence of bring it as information, bring it back because that way, when you start with those, you now actually have a long time period before we're actually, discussing, taking action, et cetera. So it's one of the good reasons for doing that. It gives you, as I said, I want you to have good, deep conversations about these things, to have been able to do research, for us to be able to do some research and bring it to you, et cetera. So I hope that the way we set the agendas will allow for that with some more advance notice in that way, and that we're not surprising you with a topic that you didn't have time to do. But let me see if there's a way to do that intermediary without too much effort to fill it out a little in case you want to get ahead of it a bit.
yeah,
Yeah.
I don't want to add a lot of extra work, so only if there
know
is
that.
something in there that is already happening that's easy just to report on versus, I don't want to create new work, so.
Might be something that you and I, when we do our check-ins, we could come up with a 2-sentence blurb about
Yeah.
the things that are upcoming or something, and
Okay.
so maybe something like that, without adding more to
Yeah,
everybody
think about
else.
it and
Yeah.
see,
Okay.
yes.
We will look at that. We need the abstain thing here. I mean, that's just kind of practice. I would assume that if somebody abstains, you're saying why you're abstaining. We do have the recurring one of the consent item for the Apple related, but I think once you've done that, you've said why. We all know why. I think there was just an issue about people not knowing, well, why did so-and-so abstain? They just, without giving
And I think
reason.
Renee was reflecting those in the minutes, weren't you? When there were no's or abstentions, were you putting in the minutes why? Yeah,
Oh, yeah. Oh, the why?
yeah, she was putting why in the minutes. Yeah.
If someone states why, then we put in, yeah, okay, yeah. But I mean, our abstentions have been primarily things that you've said, I can't vote on this because, right? So
Right,
that's,
right.
which is usually the case, and then it's
Yeah.
obvious, right? Okay.
But there's a difference between an abstention and a recusal, right? Because Lori recuses, she doesn't
Oh.
abstain, right?
Right, that's true, yes. Right, okay. So we'll just leave that. We have a few to alter, it sounds like, on here, but nothing major. Is there anything in terms of how we could operate more efficiently or better, if you don't like the word efficient, but just to be, you know, a better board and to do the community's work well? Yeah.
I had a question about, one of my perceptions and/or things I'm holding myself to is really that concept of board members are advocates for our kids and for our district. And I think there have been a couple times already with like the VTA letter of support, or with, you know, my request for us to, you know, put in a note about the Prop 51 funding. You know, in either case, advocating for our kids, advocating for our district, sometimes the timeline of when those would be most effective doesn't always align with board meetings. And so I'm wondering how people feel about just that whole concept of if there are things that we're asking for sort of a letter of support, a letter of advocacy from the district, from the superintendent, how people feel about the concept in general, and then also about when that doesn't always align with the timeline of our board meetings and our agenda setting, and, you know, maybe bringing it back twice, et cetera, et cetera. I've talked to a lot of board members and a lot of council members from local cities and local school boards, and I wish I could tell you there was one way everybody does it, and there's not. There's one extreme where, you know, everything comes back to full council every single time for all 5 members to vote on. The other extreme of almost always it's designated to the city manager or the superintendent, and then there's hybrids that are, you know, kind of a partnership between, you know, superintendent or city manager and mayor, president, vice mayor, vice president. And then also a hybrid version that is, you know, a superintendent with the board member who's asking for it. So I think there's all sorts of different versions out there. I think the most common is some sort of delegation of responsibility to a superintendent or a city manager to use their discretion as to when it absolutely must come back before the full board and the full council versus when it's okay to kind of say that doesn't really align with our timing, but we could be good advocates here and proceeding. And I don't know what the level of comfort with that is.
So it seems like there are two things. One is whether or not we should be sending such letters.
Yep.
And then if so, how do we do it if it needs to happen within?
Our timeline to be
not every
effective
2
doesn't,
weeks.
right. We miss the opportunity to be effective if it doesn't happen to align with our board calendar.
But some level of the discussion is needed, or because.
Guys, I think we need to talk up just a little bit for the mics and everything. Yeah, just so we hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah, but I'm short.
Wow, I'm trying to sit
Yeah,
back so you guys can see each
Come
other.
This is why we need the lapel
I know,
mics. Yeah.
Jerry is intentionally blocking me, okay? So I think some level of discussion would be needed, right? Like before, because how all of us would be in the same page when you are empowering or authorizing somebody to
So I think that's.
act behalf of us.
I think that's where the delegation that some other local boards and councils have come in on is like, if you say that your superintendent or your city manager, in the case of the city councils that I talked to, is your person that kind of knows the general lay of the land and says, it's sort of their litmus test of, this is a no-brainer, like this is good for our district, good for our kids. I know if we had a discussion, I'm 99% sure all of us are gonna be on the same page, versus the things that maybe are a little bit more shades of gray that maybe do warrant a discussion. And so that's, I think, the boards and the councils that have chosen to delegate that responsibility to their expert, their staff expert, you know, that's how they've handled it. But then, like I said, there is a council I know of where no matter what, everything has to come back to that council or nothing happens. And so it means sometimes they miss out on an opportunity even for the no-brainers because it just doesn't happen to align with their calendar, or they turn things in late and, you know, it doesn't get counted. So,
When can we have a special meeting? What-
You have to talk into the mic.
Yeah. Oh. Okay, so I think, I hope I'm not leading. One side, I'm really stuck between Sylvia and Jerry, can't play. So I think, what circumstances we can have a special meeting, actually? Because you are having anyway, every other week there's a meeting. So it's not a lot of time, actually speaking, but is there a possibility to insert something in between if it is so urgent? And quorum is only 3 people needed, so.
Yeah,
you
I
would-
mean, I guess that kind of begs the question of, is that the consensus that everybody wants to call a special meeting anytime something like
No,
that
if it is that
comes up?
critical, if it is that critical.
It's-
I would
it's a fair-
rather.
It's a fair question. I mean, I guess it depends on what your bar for critical is.
I think I would rather have some kind of a discussion before putting the quote, authorizing someone to send a mail behalf of us. I think because last time we had a good discussion. I think even though it was an ad hoc request about the VTA stuff, it came up and pretty well. And finally, I think Craig did that, right? So. If we cannot wait till the next meeting, I think, and you don't need 5 people also, right? So to have a special meeting, I think as long as we are meeting the quorum, it should be okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're
I
almost
don't-
always within 2 weeks at least of a meeting, and if we have to fast track it at a meeting for timing, but it's pretty rare that an advocacy-related thing is just have to answer within the next week or two, and when it is, maybe we do have to pull together some folks to do it. You post as long as you have 3 days, but it's not usually. I mean, on some level, though, if it's something we've talked about as a board, and I do know, I'm able to write something on behalf of the board based on what I know has been discussed at board meetings, right? As can the board president. So we can always do that. It just seems pretty rare
Well,
that
I mean,
we're.
In both cases, I mean, so like the VTA letter, we were a week late, and you and I had talked about writing to them and letting them know we were sending a letter, but that we couldn't send the letter until XYZ date.
Right.
So we were a week past when they were asking for it.
But it worked. I mean, in the
yeah.
end, they said that's fine. So yeah.
And in the case of the Prop 51 one, that hasn't come back yet for the agenda. It didn't make it onto this agenda. And so, I mean, I don't know where that one stands in terms of if it will go in before the legislators do their May revise on the 14th or not. So I guess if it's at your discretion, it can go. If it must come back on an agenda, we've already missed it. So.
Well, that's so like the Prop 51 is completely within my role and responsibility. That if I think that it's important to, write to a legislator on anything, I can do that on behalf of the board based on what I know to be true about our beliefs. So I'm not.
So then I don't even need to ask the fellow board members about that.
Depends on what you want it gets back to what's in the letter. If it is the board had a discussion and here's what they said, that would be different. But if it's we just want to advocate on, and from a staff position, this is why that would be important for us in relation to bonds or in relation to facilities in general, et cetera. I mean, those are things I think that are delegated to me. It's different if it's advocating politically for something that it has not been discussed or is new. There hasn't been. I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that at that point, right?
Well, which is why I guess the question I'm posing is everybody comfortable with leaving that to you to delegate? I mean, we don't have a protocol for that right now, right? So like in the case of the VTA one, you said it needed to come back, so it did come back. We discussed it, it was late, but it was okay. In the case of the 51 one, what I'm hearing you saying is that's within your scope anyway, so if it decides to go, it goes. But in either case, we did rely on you to delegate to that. We delegated to you to help us make that decision, and in both cases, I think you did, but we don't have a protocol for that, so I guess I'm just trying to feel out where everybody's at on that.
I certainly think that it's within the understanding of my role and is covered through contract and other language in various ways.
Okay.
So but the question is, so are a lot of the things that are on our agreements. So it's a matter of whether people feel like you want to more specifically identify my role and or others' role in relation to advocacy stuff. And I'm hearing a little bit some uneasiness about delegating too much of that, certainly on behalf of the board. That's kind of what I've heard so far a little bit.
I'm comfortable with letting Craig make the decision. If something comes in and he knows where we stand on it, he writes a letter or not. If he feels that it's something that needs to come back to the board, he brings it back. I'm comfortable with that.
comfortable with, I mean, this board has not historically
Done letters.
done an
Exactly.
had more of an advocacy role. Are you comfortable with a little bit more of an advocacy
Not
role?
particularly, but no, I'm actually not.
Advocacy is such a big term, you know,
Okay,
there's small
better-
advocacy
okay,
and big.
Small a?
Yeah. I mean, writing to a legislator to say that, you know, our schools really need more funds for facilities,
Right.
nobody's gonna argue that, right?
right.
That's a.
And I think
that's
the
a- that's not
VTA was
really-
pretty clear. I mean, we want good
Right.
transportation for our kids, but some of them, I would
Are
object to,
political,
yeah,
yes,
if
So-
they're political, yeah.
So I prefer, as much as possible, try to have a meeting and discuss, okay? But absolutely, there is a cutoff, like, you know, and we believe, we can trust you, like, not that we don't trust you otherwise.
No,
What I mean
I
is,
wouldn't
we
if
can
I were you.
authorize and
Yeah.
we can do that, but I think for the better understanding, it's not like we support or not, that's a different thing. Most likely, we will end up in supporting, okay? I think, like, you know, just to be making sure all of us are the same page and good transparency and everything, and we feel that we collectively made a decision, we should try to have a meeting or some way of a communication with us, and you are saying by tomorrow evening, no option, so, yeah, we are okay with that.
The other
That is
thing
my-
is, it might, if it came up and it was timely, and it might come up in a time when Craig could speak with each of us individually
Yeah.
at our individual one-on-one
Yeah,
meetings
I
with
think
him,
that's
and that would give him an idea of whether or not it's
deal, yeah.
appropriate.
Actually, in past a couple of times, he had called also, like, you know, I
Or
think he
call
can
us,
call
yeah.
us, like, you know, you call, if there is something like this, I send you a mail or something, you want to answer some, that would also be okay. But I think it's good to keep us in loop and kind of get a perspective of each of what we think, that'll be good.
It's within the scope of the Brown Act for Craig to contact us individually to say, what do you
Yes,
feel
it is.
about this?
Yeah.
Without sharing, that would be, so he actually can actually find out how we
Yeah.
feel about this through these
Which I would, yeah.
one-on-one communications.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I like everything I've heard, I think certainly, that, you know, in so much as possible, having special meetings, that would be good, I understand where Lori's coming from, sometimes we don't hear about this. I would be comfortable delegating the power to the president, who then, if he wishes, then delegate to, because I feel like, you know, the power's with the board. So if you write on behalf of the district, and you write behalf on the staff, that would be a prerogative. But if you're gonna write on behalf of the board, I would like there to be an explicit delegation from the board president to you.
And I can't communicate with you about that, but he can.
Better to
Yeah.
have that with me for
But
that
certainly
reason,
you would
yeah.
know the
But he
issue.
would talk to me,
Right.
absolutely,
I
yeah.
think generally, I think for local issues, if you're gonna talk about, send a letter on whether or not we should bomb Iraq, or whether or not we should do a trade war, go for it, Craig, you can put whatever you want. But, you know, please don't send a letter advocating or against Valco, you know? That, I mean, I
Right.
think some of the local ones are the ones that where maybe the community want us more involvement.
Oh, yeah,
And trade war with China, go for it. And so,
yes.
that's my feeling.
Correct.
I think
Got it.
that's a very good point. I think we have to, I know it's hard to define, but I think some kind of, you know, a boundary. I know it's a little difficult, but
Yeah, no, and I totally hear what you're saying. I mean,
Yeah.
that's where I think that delegation piece comes in. I don't think Craig would ever send anything on behalf of Velco, on behalf of all of us, without having extensive conversations with us.
And you would
So-
have plenty of recourse to take care of that problem.
So, yeah, no, I mean, I hope I preface this, and if I forgot to preface it, I'm only talking about things that are good for our kids and good for our district, right? That's as political as I think any board should get, is only specifically when it's about our kids and our
yeah. So
district. Yeah.
I think two things. One is, if possible, try to bring it to the next board if we can extend it as much as.
Right.
Or the next thing is there a way for us to meet before? Second thing. Third thing, absolutely no option. Then Craig would contact each of us
Individually.
individually.
Yeah.
Then he will
Yeah.
make a decision based on the
Okay,
input
that
from
sounds
all.
good
That's
to me.
how
Does
I
that
have it
work
down,
with
yeah.
everybody?
Just want to make sure. It's okay if there's,
I think for me, I like advocacy, big A and little a, like, but, and I feel like, especially for you, Lori, because if you are so up to date with some of the things that are happening, full and fair funding, that kind of stuff, right? That I would love to be able to have that conversation in the board meeting. So I like the idea of being able to talk about it in the board meeting rather than these kind of one-on-ones, and then it just feels like telephone sometimes. Like, so I like having it more in the open.
So when it's appropriate, when the time makes that work, we'll do
Yeah.
that, yeah,
Right, right.
Yeah.
yeah,
I think
Good.
have a kind of an agreement on that.
yeah.
Kind of a related point, a question really. Do we currently have a policy around remote attendance, or is it allowed?
Regarding what?
A remote attendance, someone dialing into a board meeting rather
Yes.
than being physically here? What's the current?
Yeah, well,
policy?
that's completely dictated, that's a Brown Act thing, actually, and it's dictated by the law. And so it is certainly legal to do it. You have to post on the agenda ahead of time, so-and-so will be joining us remotely. And then that notice has to be posted where that person is. So for example, if you're I've had to do that at a conference, on your door in your hotel, you gotta put up a thing that's a community meeting. So yeah, there are rules around that. It is a doable thing,
So-
and it
so-
has to be noticed as such.
So if you're taking it from room 223 at a Hilton, you post it on that door?
That's right.
You open your
You have to
door so
put the
public can
address
come
on
in?
there, everything, yeah.
Interesting.
Make your bed.
Okay, thank you, all right.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Make sure you made your bed, exactly.
Get housekeeping in before
Yeah.
the meeting starts.
Yeah, I recommend close the bathroom door usually, things like that, yeah. Yeah, no, but yes, it is possible, and it happens from time to time.
Okay, thank you.
Are we gonna talk about the social media? Is that part of this bullet?
Oh,
Media.
yes.
Social media,
Yeah.
we got a lot of stuff. about
Yeah,
this.
we got a lot, I'm glad, thank you, I almost totally forgot that. And this was, I can't remember, it might have been originally raised by the old board at one point, and we had some minimal conversation
you did,
around it.
yeah.
And I think somebody had brought it up again at some point, and so I've just been tracking for a long time. Maybe we should talk about appropriate use of social media. We gave you two resources. One is a model from Texas about how they built a protocol. I don't believe it's a policy, it's a protocol or something like that, and or guidelines. And then we had our legal counsel draft a little something also just to help clarify. And those two things look pretty aligned with one another, but we really just wanted to put it out. And I know that several of you are do
Have a
forms of
presence on-
blogs
yeah.
and things like that. So I just thought, for your own sake and for ours, that it would be good to check in and see if we want to add anything around that to our protocol, or is it necessary based on what you saw there. And that's as much as I had. I just wanted to bring you that and maybe have an open conversation about it. And thanks for reminding me. Yeah.
So this is the memo we got from Greg Danis's group as a suggestion for guidelines. Is this why he sent it?
Which one is this one?
This is the one
Jeff,
from,
is this the?
This is the memo from DWK.
From
DWK,
DWK,
okay.
yeah.
So I'll kick it off. I liked the Texas examples, in terms of some of the protocols that they put in, especially like, because because I am doing social media, it's nice for me to have some guidelines. Like there's one about like, be careful if your board member says something, then you shouldn't necessarily comment on it, right? And I was like, oh, okay, that's something to think about, right? But I've also seen when there's community members commenting on somebody else's post, like, you know, whether or not we respond to that or whether or not you
Right.
respond to that. So I think it'd be good to, I'd like to get some, yeah, can we talk about that a little bit? Like, how
Yes.
do you want to deal with that?
Yeah, can you put that scenario out again? So, one of you might have posted something, you mean?
So let's, so like, Jerry posted a picture of him having lunch at the elementary school, and then there was a couple comments about lunch. Some of them.
Community comment.
Community comments.
Responding to that.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And then, like, I noticed, like, that you didn't respond. And I'm just trying to figure out, like, where it all falls, like, you know, like,
I think
Should it
that,
be
so what I'm hearing there, probably happens a lot, I'm guessing, for me, gets to the main point of everything that we're seeing, regardless of which one, which is you just have to make it really, really clear when you're speaking for you or you're speaking for board. So that gets dicey if you posted a picture of you at a school or whatever. But I think you can just respond saying, FYI, because I am only speaking for myself as an individual and not for the district, I will not be responding to the comments coming in on this topic. Right, so there's a way for you always to keep a firewall in front of you to protect, to make sure, because I think when you really look at everything, it's all about keeping a line between when you are doing a personal blog, it is not on behalf of the district, right? And so, yes, you still get to post something about something you did at a school. You then I do think you have to stay out of it, and you get to make it clear. You can still say that because you're not responding to what they said. Does that make sense?
But it's a personal, not blog, but it's a personal page, right? But you're still posting about things that you're doing as an elected official, right? So it's not personal as in like I had lunch here and here's a picture of my food, right? Like,
Right.
so.
No, that's right. I think that's the nuance, and that's why we have these protocols. But I still say I think you're protected. I could be wrong. I just think you're protected, and it's the right thing to do. Not just that you're protected, but it's right to just be always clear. And most people I know who have those blogs, whether they're video or otherwise, just have a constant thing that's coming up and said, remember, this is from me personally, it's my personal blog, I'm not speaking on behalf of the board. And just, if you're just really clear about that and you stay away from responding to things that might have indication of, and the frame I always put on, might we be discussing this in a board meeting and someday taking action? You better stay away from it. Because it can be interpreted as you were moving a school business-oriented thing, and it wasn't just a personal blog. It was something more than that. So I would just be really careful with that. But I don't think there's a problem with people posting to something when you have a picture of yourself, and I think you're wise not to respond.
Clarify on that from the standpoint, clarify on that from the standpoint of, so I don't think there's any reason not to use a personal example. So if I do have a video blog that I'm reporting on what took place in a snippet style format in the last board meeting, and it's really just a reporting on, right, what already took place, not even if it is something, if example, NGSS was on the last board meeting, and I say, hey, staff brought us an update on NGSS, here's what NGSS is, it will come back to us over the course of the next year because it's a pilot, period, end of sentence. That will come back to us, but that's just, am I okay there? Because I'm just stating factually, it will come back to us. I mean, because that's what was said in the public meeting too, right? What was said in the public meeting is this.
Well, that's kind of what I'm struggling with. If that's the case,
I'm
would it
wondering
be
if it
wiser
invites-
to point them there, to say?
Oh, I do. Like the beginning, I mean,
Right.
the title of it has my name in it, right? So it's clear it's me. And at the beginning of every one, I say our full agendas and all supporting documentation can be found on our CUSDK8.org website.
Right.
Like I say, it's not even just in the text. I say it out loud. So.
I interrupted you, Phyllis. Sorry.
No, I was just wondering if it's coming up on a future agenda, does that invite public comment back on your Facebook page?
So far, all of the public comment has just been, thanks, great to know. So glad
Well,
this is out there, kind of thing.
Because I'm so nervous about adding any more work to anybody's plate, I would say that what you just described is something that I'm used to having the district do after a board meeting, a very quick snippet that gets out to people right away that says, last night's meeting, we want to highlight a few things that were at last night's meeting and that will be coming back or whatever, and you just kind of give, 5 bullets of the key items, and that was something I would do in conjunction with often the board clerk, and just say, well, what are those critical items? And you try to send it out the next day so that there's no question about that because it's coming from the district. Because that feels a little bit more like, yeah, we ought to be doing that, but truthfully, I haven't raised it. That is what I've always done in the past, but I've allowed it not to happen here just because of the workload that's on all of us, frankly. But it could be that we want to do that. We want to send a quick summary that's short of the minutes and waiting for minutes, short of having to go and click on the items to review it, but at least gives public a sense of, just, last night we discussed blah, 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 the takeaway is blank, that's it, and just do. So that's one way to go about it. But I'm not trying to take away what you would like to do
No,
on
and
your
I mean,
blog.
to be
but-
fair, the only reason I started them was feedback of, I wish I didn't have to go watch a 2 or 3 hour meeting in order to stay up to date with it. And so that's what it was born of. But if the district was already filling that purpose, I probably wouldn't have started the video blog to begin with, right? Like, it came out of people asking. And if the district was filling that role, I don't feel like you're taking anything away from me. I'm doing it to be transparent and to be communicative, but
That's another interesting thing is that video blog, but having it be something from the district. And it could be done by the clerk or the board vice president or staff or whatever. I mean, I guess I'm just putting out there, it's a little bit different from the question of appropriate use of the social media essentially
Yeah, I mean, I think
versus.
it would be great if the district wants to take them over and wants to rotate through the 5 of us giving the updates. I'd make time for that.
I have a
but,
feeling
mean,
a few people, yeah, not me.
No, okay. I mean, I mean.
I'm
or-
happy for somebody to do it. I don't want to do it.
I guess I would just raise it before we get into the form of it exactly is, does the board want there to be a, is it worth staff time, effort, et cetera, or someone's effort to do a quick summary of what was discussed and, it's like a board brief. I think they're usually called something like that, and we can do it electronically, the form can be different, but
Yeah.
is there something like that you feel would be good for communication purposes to get out on behalf of all of us? And then your blogs can be something more personal to you relative to whatever you want it to be, because we don't dictate that. That's for you to do. I guess it does get a little, it's an interesting question of, is to what degree do board members put forth in a personal blog what the district talked about? Like, I'm not, that's new territory for me. I'm not the sage on that one for sure.
I think there's a council member in Sunnyvale who does something similar, basically summarizes what happened in the council meeting before, then he adds his own take. I voted this way because of this, I voted that way because of that. I think we've had board members here in the district previously that's done something similar on the personal blog, basically comment. I think I watch not everything you do, but a bit of what Lori has. I actually think it's a useful service for the community, whoever does it. And I do notice you're very good at reporting factually what happened. I think the things you talk about in terms of this is coming back, it's nothing anybody wouldn't find out if they just watched the entire video.
Right.
The fact that NGSS is coming back, not that how she felt about it, not that, but just that it's coming
Right,
back.
I
So-
try really hard not to put in personal commentary because I didn't want it to ever become shades of gray where anybody felt uncomfortable with it, so I mean, it is a function, I guess what I'm saying is, it's a function that somebody, that the district could do. And I mean, to be fair, I don't know what our stats are on our social media, if we get any hits or not. I mean, these videos probably get between, depending on the video, 150 to 350 people watching it. So, I don't know if that means that that's working and it's something we want to look at, or if that, I don't know how that compares to what.
So my take on it would be, like, I think I love your little board shorts thing, and I do think it's a good thing for us to do. I like the idea of, let's just let the board vice president be the one that does it, so that it's not adding more.
And next year it'll be the board president.
And the following year, it'll be a board member.
It'll be the person who-
But like I like the idea of
I do too.
officially making hers like the official one. Right? Or so that it's not then something that is added to your plate.
If it's going to
If
be
it's
the official
already-
one, though, I think Jeff has to review it before it gets posted.
Leslie
Somebody
or- yeah,
does.
uh-huh.
one of the things that we can do, and we do this for any social media account that's across the district, is we have a tool called Archive Social, which backs up everything. Because as you're talking about this right now, the thing that I'm thinking about is that retention piece of it. And one of the things that we always have to do is how are we capturing
Right.
everything that we post? And so we do have an archiver that does that. In addition, the one thing I would say that is also a change that came out of San Jose when the as public records changed with the San Jose case, even something that is deleted or a comment is actually subject to public record. So you can't take down a comment, take down a post. You actually have, you can take that down, but you have to have that backup somewhere. And what's really difficult on some of the social media avenues, in particular Facebook and Twitter, it's really, really hard to go backwards in time to find that post that was taken down. And so I would just encourage maybe having some sort of an archiver and open to the conversation around, but right now we use Archive Social to do it.
So I am happy to work with you to see if we can figure out a way to, I mean, so I don't know if the elected, when you go through the Facebook vetting process to get an elected official page, I don't know if there's anything specific to that that would or wouldn't allow us to do that, but I'm happy to work with you on that if that's, I have no problem having it archived.
So we're running a little bit behind
Yes,
time, so
sorry.
is that acceptable with the rest of the board if Lori and Jeff just work together on that?
And I think Leslie.
And
also,
Leslie?
yeah. Because Pam would be involved, et cetera. So, yeah, that'd be great.
Y'all good with that?
Just had a question on a different topic,
Yeah.
on social media. So next door, it's a discussion forum. And so sometimes I'll see one of my colleagues posting. What I've done is if I see one of us post on a thread and I don't, even though I want to say something, I just leave it alone because one of us is already on there. Just want to share that. Should we, is that good practice? Am I being too cautious here? Can I just jump in also? Probably not from that look on your face. But just wanted to get some thoughts on this, on if.
I mean, you'll notice that I do receive them, but I've only once responded since I've been in the district when completely false information was being spread. Then I step in, I just say, hey, superintendent here, just so you know, I read this and that information is false. I encourage people to reach out to me to talk about, to learn the truth, something like that. But I keep it really simple, and I don't engage. I just, for me, it's just the ugliest of fora, and I just don't want to engage personally. Yeah, and I think you get to, but again, you would have to be careful saying, I'm responding. I know a lot of you know I'm a board member, but I'm not responding on behalf of the board. So you would still have to use that same thing where you're not talking for anyone but yourself. If you want to respond, feel free to. Yeah.
So, before we kind of.
Yeah. Can we? Go ahead. Yeah.
One thing we learned a couple of years ago is that disclaimer becomes really important. So that was part of that guidance that we received from legal at that time, is acknowledging when you are acting as a board member and when you are acting, whether it's a blog or a post, when you're acting as an individual citizen within the Cupertino community or within our
Do you have
community.
that language you could share with us? So we
Is
could
saying
just-
personally enough, or do you need an actual?
How the disclaimer is.
Right,
It was
right.
just really acknowledging that I'm acting as an individual citizen. It wasn't
Yeah.
anything fancy. It was very
Right.
simple,
So
actually.
you can literally just say, personally, I feel, and that, is that enough?
I'm addressing this as an individual
Citizen,
citizen.
not as a board
As
member.
citizen, as not
I
a
would be
board
more
member.
specific than personally.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Citizen, not as a board member. I think those are critical terms, I would say.
Sylvia?
So before we close out this topic, I just wanted, can we put something together that's similar to the
Texas one?
That would be helpful to me.
Oh, okay.
I feel like we've talked about it, but I don't get a sense of what our protocols are yet, so.
Yeah, Jeff, sorry. When we sent that, we sent the Texas one to the legal as well, and then we have a response. Would it be a big deal to convert, just kind of make one document that's ours that reflects all the appropriate good parts of the Texas one, and, you know what I mean? And we'll just make one, maybe even try to get it to a one-pager or something if we could,
That would
keep
be
it
really
simple.
helpful.
Add it to our protocols.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and including that kind of language, like the
References, yeah.
disclaimer language,
Right.
those kinds of things, that would just, so I have something to
Be helpful.
help guide me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
No, so we'll do that. Great.
All right, if there's nothing else, I think we're done. I just have one more comment to make. I've been doing this for 11 years, actually 50, but 11 on the board. I've worked with lots of board members over the years, and I think you guys are awesome. I think we just have a great board, and so,
Yeah, really.
Good
it's
for
true.
us.
Doing great work. Maybe a quick 5-minute break? 'Cause
Yes.
We're about to get into another probably 90-minute conversation
big
around the,
discussion.
yeah.
Okay, so 5 minutes, when the big hand gets on 6. We're
Oh, that's. We're not rolling yet, so.
okay. Well, I think we need to wait a minute. I just want to do a quick check-in on time. We have 2 hours left, and we have 2 items left on the agenda. Strategic plan, pretty meaty. LCAP, just an update. So how are you feeling if we take an hour and a half to do strategic plan so we can really get into an in-depth discussion? And then the last 30 minutes, an update on LCAP.
I'm good with that. I like that.
Does that work
And
for
we're
everybody?
basically bringing LCAP back every meeting for the
Right.
rest of the school year, so this isn't a last shot at it, but we're just trying to stay on top of it. But we wanted to check to make sure
I'm fine with that, and who do you want us to go to with LCAP questions?
anyone but me.
Sylvia, okay with it?
Yeah,
For
are
that
we gonna
time?
talk a little bit about SIPSA during the LCAP thing too? Okay.
About,
SIPSA's,
oh, are we?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we will.
Okay, Satish, are you okay with that timing? Okay, good. Then let's go with strategic plan. I don't know who's up first. It looks like Allison is.
Thank you. Yes, so we're excited to be at the phase of the planning process where we're actually bringing a draft summary document to you for feedback today. As we go into this, we just wanted to remind all of us that we're hoping to have things in place so that we can have communication tools ready for the start of next school year, hopefully for back to school nights. So this will be our first opportunity to look together at a summary document on paper, and then we'll continue working through that for the remainder of this school year and building it out over the summer in hopes that we can hit that target of having communication available for the start of the next school year.
Can I just add that the board, taking you back to board priorities, the strategic plan was one of our priorities, and our measure of success this year was going to be to have a draft of something in place so that we at least have enough agreement on where we are to move forward. And so this is following up on that, and hopefully we'll feel comfortable, at least as a draft, as a result of this. Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to jump in. One of the things that we wanted to share with you before we get into looking at the at a glance page was some of the things that we've been looking at as we've been going through this process of flaring with our community and working with our steering committee to continue to massage and synthesize the information that we're collecting. What we know is, there's lots of great examples out there. This is a very small list. We won't go through all of these today, but I will send you a document where it's actually hyperlinked because it's not in your board docs hyperlinked, so that you can play around. But what we know is our goal is to have our strategic plan come alive for our community. We heard from our steering committee that something that is easy for the community and staff to jump into, something that's visually appealing. And in addition to that, there probably needs to be a very detailed document that accompanies whatever our at-a-glance looks like. And so as we're looking at how this plan will come alive, we're looking at what would that graphic be? What would be the thing similar to that CUSD 25 that someone would see and say, oh, that's Cupertino Union School District strategic plan. And they'd have some reference to, what are the components of it. In addition to that, that easy to view one-pager, and then the detailed version. And so what we thought we would do is just quickly show you a couple different examples of how this could play out, just to sort of sprinkle some ideas. We're not going to discuss this item because really what we want to do is we want to spend time today discussing the one-pager. So one of the ones that we found is called Blue School, and it's interesting. So when you go to Blue School, it sort of has all of the components in one. So here's their visual that is a dynamic document, and you could look at this and say, wow, okay, I know their plan is about all of these things. It's pretty visually appealing, we believe. And then for individuals that want to go deeper, what they're able to do is, let's say they want to go to the arts because that's something of interest to them. They click on this, and it goes into more depth with pictures in regards to what does that mean at Blue School, at this learning environment. Go back. So you're able to click through here to get a snapshot. And one of our hopes is that as we determine what our one-pager will be looking like, is that we build it out on our website to make it a dynamic, appealing way for individuals to learn about our district. The other thing that they have, if you go up here, is the Blue School Promise. This is sort of like their one-pager. We're looking at a different kind of template for that, but it, in a nutshell, talks about the high-level values, mission, and I believe these ones are not clickable. So these don't go into a deeper area like that first graphic page. And then from that, you've got your big, complete document, sort of what I want to call it as a white page, but I'm not sure if that's the correct term, that really, really spells out at a very deep level that you know, I think some of our community members would be intrigued by that, but what we heard from our steering committee team is that our parents will not go to this depth. This might be that, that document that we use to help us demonstrate how our LCAP is living out over the next couple of years. So these are just some examples that we were intrigued by. Another one that we wanted to share with you, and it's not quite as dynamic, is we'll go to the Stanford Graduate School of Education. So their graphic is pretty simple with a tagline, so improving lives through learning. In addition to that, you go to the next level, they're at a glance. It looks a little bit like the draft that we'll be showing you today. Not a dynamic document, and again, it's one of the things that we're hoping for is to create it.
Sure. Yeah, because I had used it and it went, click on education for our grand challenges.
Challenges.
I think some of
I went to one
that was dynamic.
Live, and it
Okay.
would take you to more descriptors of each of those.
Okay.
sections,
And I'm wondering if that one, when you go into the detail, and it could be also how this is more of that white page. So there is a place when you go to the original web page, I think that's what you're referring to, Craig, if I go here. I think Allison and I were playing with this yesterday, and we go down through here, where you're able to click on what's next in discovery, what's new in innovation, and learn to turn ideas into action. And so these are some of the things that we are looking at, and certainly as we move forward and we create the platform for this, we will, we'll encourage you to give us feedback as to what works and what is appealing to you. I think for today's purpose, though, what we really want to spend time on is an activity around the at a glance. And so Allison is going to lead us.
I was going to give a little context. in here, if I
Absolutely,
do that.
and Craig is
So-
going to give context.
Yeah, that's right. So what I did want to say is that from the get-go, we have been talking about not necessarily having a traditional kind of strategic plan. The previous board reviewed at one point a bunch of different kinds of strategic plans, and we spent time talking about, well, what do we want? In the end, we're not necessarily looking for the tradition, even in terms of we want a vision statement, a mission statement, a tagline. We don't need to do all of that stuff unless, as a group, we decide that's what we want to have. But if you really look out there in this day and age, most organizations don't have, mission, vision, always a strategy, et cetera. There's so many ways of doing it. And I think it's really critical for us as an educational institution to think about how do we best do that from my perspective, to say everything we do focuses on our children, and that's what we're about, and therefore that's what guides us. It may not be a mission statement. You can have one. We can talk about that. But I'm hoping that as we go through this exercise, everybody is thinking openly about not just doing what everybody does for a strategic plan. that it has to have these components, because it doesn't. In fact, in that Blue Hills one, it's a really good example where they did it very differently if you actually spend a lot of time on it, other than a promise for their community. The rest of it is actually very different. And it feels like it captures who they are as a school, and you understand their strategy, you know where they're going, and you can feel it, it exudes it in a lot of ways. So it's just sort of my plea for, let's not get too bogged down in the exact form as being somewhat traditional, but make sure that it really reflects who we are, where we're headed, and our promise to our community and our children. Okay? Yeah.
So Leslie and I have been having lots of fun taking all of the stakeholder feedback and trying to get it into our draft document. And we wanted to give you some time to take a look at that today. We reviewed it with the principals and assistant principals at our last meeting and got some great feedback and an overall feeling of we're on the right track, that it feels like the direction that we're trying to go. We also met with our group of high school kids yesterday afternoon, which was really fun. They were so insightful and had so many important things to say. And some of the things they highlighted that I just wanted to call out as we were looking at this is they talked a lot about the importance of student ownership of learning and opportunities to practice finding their own way and building their own projects rather than having adults tell them do this and this is how you'll go about it, but those opportunities to really find their own way. In academic kinds of assignments like project-based learning opportunities, but also the importance of the K-8 years as a time when you're finding out about who you are as a learner and what you're interested in, having that voice and choice to not only work on the things that you're assigned, but things that you're interested in. They also focused a lot of conversation on social emotional learning. I would say the bulk of the conversation was about kind of those habits of mind and social emotional learning, and not specifically the academic skills, but the things that support academic learning. So things like risk-taking and how it feels to them when adults say take a risk, but yet you might lose points or have a bad grade if you do, because maybe your risk might put you into a new territory. They talked a lot about the importance of collaboration as well, being a really critical piece, and that's important to them, that they feel they gain a lot. So as we've been going through all of the focus and flares, we've been trying to capture the feedback from staff, our own students, high school students, parents, and putting it into the one-pager, into these themes of ideas that we've been talking about all year. So we wanted to give you maybe 10 minutes or so just to think on your own. We proposed this Roses, Buds, Thorns protocol. It's kind of a nice organizer to help us surface ideas that feel really promising and feel like they're in good shape already. Buds are those ideas that feel like they're emerging but might need some revision, and then thorns are those sticky points, places where we feel like we might need to make some major revision or maybe something's missing. So today we're really going after that kind of broad feedback. We know that we will have a lot of need for the wordsmithing, and we're thinking that can be, outside of the meeting. You can send those to us and we can try to, get that wording exactly right. But today, hoping to capture, how does this feel as a set of ideas? Just generally, what do we think about kind of the form, but without going too deep into kind of those shifts that get at that micro level? Because we know we can keep capturing feedback and working through those pieces as we go further into spring. So that's our proposal for the next set of time, that you would have quiet time to take a look at the drafts and use the organizer, and then we would come back to discussion. And we have a couple different drafts here. Do you want to?
Yeah, so we met with, so Jerry and Sylvia are on our steering committee, and so what we wanted to do, we met with them earlier this week, and they gave us some input on the top section, where one page, the green page, says our promise to our CUSD children, or to our children and families, and the other was a portrait of a learner. And we're not sure we captured, we presented them with the page that said a portrait of a learner. And one of the things that we all talked about when we met was how wordy this document was. And was there a way we could shift some of it? And so we played with that after the meeting, which is why you have two different documents. Otherwise, everything's the same. So when you're comparing the two, look at the two top left boxes, but you can look at either document for all the other content. And then just so you know, I mean, like Allison was sharing, there is some wordsmithing to be done. You'll notice in the right-hand column, we've got some dots, and we've got some question marks. We'll fill those in. And we know there are errors in it, and so we will fix those along the way. But really, we just want you to dig in, reflect on your own, and then we'll begin, or Phyllis will lead a discussion in regards to what's surfacing for you. That will help us hopefully get to a point where we can revise and hit a target date in the fall.
Can I ask just one quick clarifying question? You used the word form, feedback, you wanted feedback on the form. Do you literally mean like the format you're presenting it to us, or just the content?
I think, well, we want to focus mostly on the content, but just in the sense of, is it clear to you how to read the document? Those kinds of pieces of feedback would be helpful today, but not at the wordsmithing level, or we know it looks crowded, we're going to need to kind of address some of those pieces, but we are thinking that a one-pager approach is something that might be helpful. So just kind of at that level, the principals gave us that feedback, that having something that they could use as a communication tool that was, brief.
And it could take the form of a brochure,
Yeah.
a little
Could be
trifold. It could be
folded.
different things, but we don't want to get too bogged down in that. But just the notion of a sort of a at a glance, here's what it is, that captures it in some way on a one page or something simple.
That's helpful. Okay.
How much time do we give it?
So, John, 12 minutes.
12 minutes.
I think. Yeah.
Renee sent something out saying refresh board docs. I think we're good. It's up there.
I
Yeah.
just refreshed and it wasn't there.
Oh, I've got it. I've got
Okay.
version 3 and 4.
And we definitely have this posted, right? I thought it was.
1 minute left, and then we'll come together for discussion.
Nice to know what feels good to go. Is this for supervision next year? Yeah. I think
Okay, we're going to move forward with the discussion of the strategic plan. So we'll start the discussion by going through the feedback sheet. So let's start with roses. Let's hear what everybody has to say about what they found that was exciting and promising about the plan. Somebody want to start?
I have a list of 8 or 9 items. Did you want us to rotate or just go through the list?
Just go through. Just go through. We'll just go around and everybody can go through.
Sure. I'll go ahead and start then.
Okay?
So the roses, first of all, I really like the structure. I think, to what Dr. Baker said in terms of reflecting who we are, where we're going, our promise to children, this captures it very well. So we can make it prettier and all that, I know, but I like the structure. I like the project-based learning aspect. For me, that's tied closely to the student ownership of learning. Those are, I think, I like to see these memes being emphasized as first-class objects in the strategic plan. And also, again, with the, the talks about compassionate, kind, which is really teaching our children to be better world citizens, right? The whole civics piece. So that's, I also like that. And some of the other traits, critical thinking, resilience, parent engagement, and then the whole notion of teacher sharing, learning, collaboration, and again, having support for that are all exciting things that I saw out of this plan. Thanks.
Okay, good. Thanks, Jerry. Anybody else want to go? Lori?
The concept of promise really resonates with me, more so than the term portrait. I've kind of been struggling with that word portrait, and I can talk more about that when we get to the thorns. But this top box here in version 4 versus version 3, like, you nailed it. Stacy and I have had this conversation that I think as biology majors, we love bullets. I love the bullets. So wherever you're doing that, where you're breaking it out into more digestible, bite-sized takeaways, that for me speaks to me as a parent. I don't know if it speaks to everybody as a parent, but that's how I think. And so I love that we have that mix of calling out the small bite-sized snippets versus the more, little couple sentence captures down below. So a mix of both of those things is a rose for me. The whole section on relevant and rigorous just knocks it out of the park. I think we are hitting on everything I think of when I think of sort of the academic part of it. And then the little subsection under whole child focus with kindness and sympathy, that one also just really resonates with me. I think nailed it. And then the fact that this whole document almost feels like it's building is the same thing we're trying to do for our kids. And so this concept of, laying a foundation and learning is a building process, I think lends itself very well to the way you've organized this as well. It builds on itself. So those are the things that were roses for me.
Hey, Satish, do you have some roses for us?
Yeah. I think already they said pretty much I have written the same thing. I like that the format for the draft 4 pretty much. And I'm an engineer, I go with the bullet items always. Because cut into pieces and easy to understand. Okay. And actually, the draft 3 has a lot of verbages, and I feel it's a lot of kind of repetition, and you have to go back and forth. So this is pretty much, I think there's no overlap or anything. Very nicely done. The first column, the left top, and how it is compartmented also is pretty good. The relevant and rigorous, personalized, whole child focus. I think this is exactly what we are, we are looking for, and done pretty well. Except I think little bit which I'll talk on the next one, but it's in the data-driven planning and instruction. Like I think I want to double click on that, how it is. But pretty much overall on that is pretty good. This is also pretty good, but I think it can be a little bit more.
So let's get to buds
yeah.
and the other ones, just the roses for now. Okay, Sylvia, roses.
So I really like the strategic directions section. I like that it touches on every aspect of the district, like in terms of the education, and then the staff, and then the family and community, and then the classroom environment and the infrastructure. So I feel like it's good that we lay out, here's all the different areas in which it's not just about like the student or the classroom, but it's all the other stuff that it takes to get to that part where it ultimately affects the student. So I like that we kind of lay it out there. Same with the others. I love that kindness and empathy is a part of, is so important to us and so valuable to us that we have to state it here. I think that's really good. And I like the student ownership of learning. The whole personalized middle column to me is very aspirational, and I think that's good for us to be like, this is where we want to be, and this is important to us. So.
Okay. And I like also version 4.0. I like the bullets. I'm a little bit of that kind of an organized person as well. I really like the whole child focus, the way we are calling out the not the personalized, but the wellness and the kindness and the social emotional piece. And I think pretty much everything else that I like has already been said. So, yeah, so that's good. Yeah. So did you want to throw in any comments or just move on? Just keep going. Okay, so let's hear from buds, and let's hear from somebody. Let's start with somebody different from Jerry. So who wants to start with buds? Okay, Satish, you go.
Not much actually. That's what I think I started already. I think it was a little bit about. I think pretty much. First of all, it's great, and I think a little bit more for me to. I was trying to understand data-driven planning, and instruction probably. We can. I don't know how to take these words, but I feel a little bit of highly generic there. Yeah. So one area, then what else I have written? Yeah, so the family engagement also point, like, do you, I don't think it is, I know it's this also little generic. I feel that if something can be a little bit more precise, some point, if
That was in which part? In the community engagement?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so community engagement, these are the two.
Can you explain, I wasn't sure I captured the part on the data-driven, what is
No,
it?
I feel that it's good. First of all, it's good, but it's good to read. But going in deeper on that, I don't know whether we need to.
So some more clarity
Yeah,
on it.
clarity,
Okay.
correct. That's what it is pretty good,
we
but I
should-
think.
just so we clarify for everybody that what we're imagining, and in fact, on the version online, when you click on some of these, it does it goes deeper.
Oh.
So the question is how much, and we don't have to
Oh,
get into
okay.
it now, but just know that that's the structures that we'd be able to click on, hopefully A, B, and C and the head, so that you can go deeper, because there's only so much we can get on the page,
Okay, okay,
right?
got
So
it.
I just want people to know that.
Okay, I think that's a good.
But we'll still look at it.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Sylvia, you want to go next?
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is more of a bud or a thorn, so just gonna throw it out there. But I think, and we've had this conversation already, the connection or the kind of bridge from the promise to the 3 columns isn't quite clear to me. Like, you kind of have to, like, if I'm saying, okay, the first bullet is self-directed, lifelong learners, there's so much content in the promise, but there's not a clear, like, path of, okay, so in order to get to the lifelong learners, we want it to be relevant, rigorous. You know what I mean? Like,
So a lead-in sentence that says what bridges
Yeah.
the promise to, and
what
here
bridges
are
yes.
to this,
Yeah.
therefore we focus on the fall, blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah,
Okay.
like if this was on a website and you were to click on lifelong learner, would that then take you to which part of this, right? Like, like help draw that path for me.
Got it, yeah.
Okay, Lori, what have you got?
So in the personalized column, there's a mention of mentors, and I put mentors with 3 exclamation points after it on my buds because that played a huge role for me personally as a learner going through my formative years. That feels like that definition of a bud, an idea that has a lot of potential, and I hope we build into not so much the one pager, but into what's behind it on that concept. And then the flexible pace and pathways. And I think the reason I put this as a bud and not a rose is because there's a little bit of me, it's not so much when I was reading the one pager yesterday when it got sent out to me, it was more all of the stuff that went behind it. I reflected back on my experience with having a learner for which things did not come easily in the beginning. And it was very overwhelming to think about, these big aspirations for your kid as a learner when that's maybe, sorry. Wow. Not where your kid was at. Gosh, guys, I'm really sorry.
Shall we move to Jerry and come back to you?
Well, I'll finish on this.
Okay.
So that piece about the flexible pace and pathways is really the only place in here where we're speaking to families that maybe don't have that experience in the beginning, and that I just hope that we're really mindful of the fact that sometimes those things can feel very overwhelming for your child when your child is struggling.
Yeah.
And so it's just, I don't know, I guess that's why I put it as a bud, not a rose, because I feel like I want that everywhere in this.
Yeah.
I'm really sorry. So, yeah, and then on the wellness section, you guys have self-aware, and I think that the things that come to mind for me that go with that is that I want them to take that self-awareness and do something with it. So is it developing that ability to be your own best self-advocate, to know what self-care looks like, and how that plays out into your learning. So I want to take the self-awareness and then do something with it.
Okay, and no apology necessary. Jerry?
Sure. I have a couple of items. So first of all, in all of these, I have a couple, it's all really wanting to, I think, good ideas I'd like to see fleshed out, or, curious for more details. The first one is down in the strategic plan, section E, the word solvency. I know that part's yet to be fleshed out, but I just want to share some thoughts here, because I think it's critical that we have, so I think in terms of thinking it of financial capacity, having the human capital, because without that, we can't really do any of this. Solvency has a connotation from sort of staying afloat, and I think we can do much more than that. So when we flesh out that section, really talking about both the financial capacity, but also the people that we have. So I think that's important. The second one is in B. Section BB in the strategic directions, there's something that says provide professional flexibility, and that was in quotes. I like the things that it does. I'm not sure what that means, and so that's something, I guess you had it in quotes too, because you're trying to find the right word, so that's something I'd like to know more about. And then jumping down then to section D, B, align structures, time, and space to our portrait of a learner. I think what it means is about I guess aligning the resources to do, but again, that was something I was curious about, because that particular selection of words, structure, time, and space, if there was something behind that. I agree with Lori on the mentor one. That one jumped out at me under personalized, empowering our students to seek mentors. And so I guess I would maybe push for either in the strategic directions or somewhere where we provide support for that. Because it's not just encouraging them to do that, but then I can see, so where do I find these mentors? Are these other teachers? Or these perhaps professionals from the community? And just thinking a bit more about what that means, because I really like that part. And then back on, I know we've simplified the promise from the narrative to the bullets. But when I look at, so I like the bullets better, but when I look at the bullets, it still feels a little wordy. And so one idea I wanted to toss out is there's this notion of, you guys have heard this, 6-word stories. I know there's a, Jennifer Ackers, various folks. And so we might try something where, you guys can Google that. It's amazing the kind of stories you can tell in just 6 words. So the typical exercise is do your own biography in 6 words. And maybe we want to do something like that. And then associated with that, since we're in the land of Silicon Valley and it's a land of elevator pitches, if we were to explain this whole thing in 15 to 20 seconds, what would that look like? So I would maybe ask, if it's not on this one pager, that we think about that. Let's see, I had communication. 2 other things. At the bottom left, critical thinking and leadership. I like both of those traits. It jumped out at me because I don't see them as, you can have critical thinking and not be a leader, and you could, God knows you can be a leader and not really think things through. And they were kind of clumped there, and then so that was just a little flag for me. And then the last one was, I like this notion, this 9 things on the bottom left where we have these 3 categories or 3 things. And if I look at the subcategories, flexible pace and pathways and data-driven planning instruction jump out at me because the other 7 are really experiences or characteristics we want our children to have. They're sort of the goal. Those 2 feel like means to end goal, right? We don't care about flexible instruction. We care because it leads to something else. And I was wondering if we could maybe tease that out a little bit more and think about what those 2 things lead to, right? Kindness, empathy, critical thinking, those are all attributes of students. But those 2 in the middle aren't. So they kind of jumped out at me that way. So a little bit more just teasing that out. And then the last thing is, when I talk to parents and, myself, when I think about what we want for our children, I think public speaking, good communication skills is one of those things that's there. I think it's here all around, but I didn't see the word communication necessarily. And so maybe thinking about as we sort this out, maybe elevating that to I guess the sort of a first-class object in terms of the different attributes somehow. With that said, I'm not advocating for adding more things on here. I think there's something said to, so I'm not saying please add it on there, but maybe evaluate it with the 9 other characteristics we have and see what the top 9 are. So those are my buts. Thank you.
Okay, great. And I just had a couple to add to that. One is I really like as I think Lori mentioned, I like the word promise instead of the word portrait. So I don't know. I like the way it looks on the version 4 where you leave out the whole portrait part and just talk about the promise to our kids. And then under the creativity and the arts part, I was a little confused about that last sentence. Practice creativity, expression in the arts. I'm not real clear on what the expression part means. And I think that was all I had that hasn't already been said. So then, one other thing. One of the things that is not here, and it's fine with me, but I'm just wondering if you talked about it, and that is the old mission statement that we used to have looks like it's now replaced with the promise to our kids, which is fine. But was that the intent is my question. How did you decide to eliminate the old mission statement, which was really old? I mean, we're talking like 20 years old, yeah.
Right.
Okay, so let's go back, let's move on to thorns. Who'd like to start? Not Satish, not Jerry. Okay, Lori.
one little housekeeping thing. I know we said no wordsmithing, but in the strategic directions, we call out the 5 Cs, and I know we define them in the, but, as far as the bullets go, and then, for the data-driven, piece in the middle column, I struggle a little bit with, and I think there's something out there as far as how important the data is to your work as a district, to our work as a district, for informing teaching and for really helping us hit that sweet spot for learning and, all the reasons why data is so important. Where I struggle a little bit is data is different for the teaching staff in some ways than it is for students and families. And sometimes I think particularly with our middle schoolers and maybe even late elementary school, I think so much of the data that we give families becomes about grades, and it limits the conversations that sometimes happen because that data becomes very fixed and finite, and and so I don't know if there's a way that we can look bigger at our the kinds of data and the ways we use them inside the district and all the great reasons why that's so important versus the way we look at data in communicating about where our learners are at to families, because I think there's so much more opportunity for a discussion with your kiddo when you're talking about what they're learning. If you can know that they're in dilations and slopes or linear equations in math versus they have a B today and yesterday they had a B plus, or last week or whatever it is. So that piece. And then I also, the creativity and the arts one flagged for me too. It's interesting you said that. And I think, I had to think about it a little bit, and I think why is because creativity is bigger than the arts. And so I think arts belongs in the section below it where you're talking about it in the sentences, but maybe not in that little bolded title, because creativity is everything, right? We want creativity in science, we want creativity in music, we want creativity in math, right? Yeah. And that's what I have for you on, and portrait. I also, I said I would come back and talk about that. I totally get the where we started and this, going back to that kind of idea about the building process, and I was, briefly talking with Jerry about that making a portrait is a building process. And I think it helps in the explanation. I just don't love it as the forward-facing soundbite of this whole thing. So, yeah. Thank you.
So, I think for me, the biggest thorn is kind of a large idea, which is just there's too many ideas on this page. And Jerry and I, when we met, we were joking that I'm coming from a marketing background and he's coming from an engineering background, and he went straight into all the details, and I honestly just kind of glazed over all the details, and I went straight to the headings and meaningful, challenging, inspiring, right? I think it is important for us to have a vision statement and a mission statement in that we need something to say, this is who we're about. But even, and I know you guys did the work of, converting the portrait into these 4 bullet points, but even in the 4 bullet points, each bullet point has 4 different adjectives of what we want the student to be. It's too much, right? It should all connect. If we're saying that who we are is meaningful, challenging, inspiring, and I don't know if those are the words we're landing on yet, but that should then somehow be repeated in these bullets, and then again be repeated in the columns, right? Whether or not those are the words that we end on, if it's whatever, joyful lifelong learner or whatever, but those should be repeated over and over again so that we know that this is who we're about. But when we say that we're about all these different things, it feels like we're not about anything, it's too much.
Okay. Satish? Into the mic.
Probably in the other way, any reason why district infrastructure and communication combine together? So probably, I don't know whether this literally it matches because two are probably two objectives here, I guess. And I think the whole content here does not talk anything on the communication, if you see it. It's more on the infrastructure thing. So I don't know, but if you're in the Sylvia's direction, we are trying to compress, then, but other way, I'm saying probably this has to be more, this E should be probably split into two, but that may increase it, but we have to see that how it is matching exactly. This does not match my view.
Okay, Jerry.
It's just really two items. One is in section D of strategic directions. There was something about redefine success, and I just wanted to highlight that because I think it's for that to be successful, it's more than just us redefining the definition. There's a communication and there's maybe even an advocacy involved because I think parents are going to have a certain expectation of successes, and we can't just go and redefine it. Or we can, but then I think those two words belie a lot of work, and I just kind of wanted to highlight that. We have to sort of think that through. The other, I think, is picking up on what Sylvia was talking about. There does seem to be a lot here, and so maybe an exercise for us to potentially think about is what is it that we're excluding? Because I know in exercises like this, it's easy we all have our aspirations, and this is really a union of all these aspirations, but then you end up with a big list. And so can we maybe, as an exercise, think about what it is that we're explicitly saying we're not going to do, right? We're not going to shoot for straight A's. We're not going to shoot for, I don't know, being number 10 on grade schools, or whatever these things are. So anyway, just want to share these two. Thanks.
Okay, and I don't have anything to add to that. So is there anything we missed or anything that we want to tell them about this in addition to the roses, buds, and thorns? Lori, I smell wood burning.
I just want to, I guess, reflect, because I wasn't this isn't one of my committee assignments, to see this for the first time is super exciting. I know it's a lot, and I hear the filtering piece that I know is still going to happen, but it's really exciting to see this all come together. And I reflected back just because Sylvia reminded me, I didn't reflect on those 3 words up at the top. This feels meaningful, challenging, and inspiring, and I like those words. I hope those words stay.
Anybody else? I would just like to say that I love the format, and it's kind of awe-inspiring to have been sitting through all those meetings and all the flares and focuses and everything and have it condensed into this is great. And even though I know there's wordsmithing and we've had a lot of suggestions today for changes, I just commend you for great work and for involving so many of our stakeholders. So thank you. What do you have to add, Craig?
Well, I think we would benefit from a little more conversation around what Sylvia's raising, and all of you have to some degree, about this document. And just curious about, from my perspective, this is not a marketing document, so it's hard, I think, if a marketer looks at it, yeah, you're going to see it differently. I do wonder whether it's that graphic in a really simple way that we get down to a few words in order to do the marketing. But I think the way we laid this out was, in fact, purposefully not repeating, right? I kept going back in and say, oh, wait, we said that over here. We don't have to say it here. And trying to say, if our tagline is this, then here's what our promise is for our kids, which leads to, and therefore this is what it looks like, or whatever that bridge that you were talking about is. And then here's some strategic direction. And to have them all, you can see the connection between all of them, but try not to be redundant and use the same word. So to the exercise you were talking about, I actually think we deliberately went there, because and in fact we had a lot of places where there was overlap, and even in the promise itself, as I think the committee members noted, it's actually kind of redundant, right? And so that's where we pulled it into bullets to try to get rid of the things that were repeating. So I guess I'd like to hear a little bit more about that connection. And the thing is, I know it has been said famously that educators are the worst marketers in the world, because we tend to see and want to see all of it. Our thing is learning is so dynamic, it's so big, it is, it's up there with, a life entity in and of itself, right? It's something really big to us. And so the notion that you're watering it down, not watering, that's being judgmental about it, but, really being, just saying that, how do we distill it to something that is less, that is always a challenge for us? And we don't want this huge document that says, here's, that will go on a shelf that nobody will ever look at. So we have always been struggling with how do we make it really useful on multiple levels. There is a marketing bent to it, and I know that we have to look at that. There is an engineering bent to it, and we have to make sure we've engineered it in a way that makes sense. But there's something unique to me about an educational document that is making a promise to its children and its community about how important this is to us as a community. And in this world and at this time, that makes it really hard to get it down to fewer and fewer words without somebody else coming and saying, well, why didn't you talk about this? And why don't, right? Because you're always going to have that interplay. And so I just think hearing a little more thought on that so that our team, we can go off and actually do something. Now, the buds and things were really helpful, I think, because that's easy for us to say, oh, good, in the next layer, when you click on it, we're going to make sure we say enough about it, right? So those we can handle by having it layered in a way. But the question of that document on some level and what it looks like, I think we need a little more help probably to get it to the next phase.
So I can respond to that. I think, so I appreciate that there's not the redundancy, but I think maybe because you're educators, you see the connection between these words. And so for me,
Right.
I don't see the connection, right? Because for you, oh yeah, that makes sense because whatever, this is the way learning environments work or something like that. But for me, I need a more clear-cut connection because we say self-directed, that somehow takes us to relevant and rigorous. Do you know? Because otherwise it just feels like you've told me you want to be this and now we're talking about another idea, but I don't get that connection. Yeah. So
And I
not
do-
necessarily
yes.
that we need to repeat the words over and over again, but
Right.
but somehow help us understand
Got it.
how this, if it's an onion, we, remove
I think that's
that
what the
layer.
Blue Hills model actually does really well, because if you see, they have these interstices, right, these connectors. You can click on that also to
Right.
find out, well, what is the interconnection between? So I think in a way you're talking about that, well, what connects, student ownership to this
Yeah.
thing here, right? And that we're making the connections for
Well,
them.
because
So-
if what we're saying is, our promise is we want our kids to be lifelong learners. We want them to be complex problem solvers. We want them to be collaborators and communicators. And then we want them to be confident citizens, right? So lifelong learners, logically to me, then I'll be like, okay, so in order for them to be lifelong learners, our plan is this. But then is it all 9 of these things? And how does that make them a lifelong learner? It's left to me to kind of,
So would
really
it work,
analyze
would
it.
it work better for you if, are you thinking about that happening in this one pager, or are you thinking about that happening more in the click-on stuff, where it's more fully fleshed out?
I think it needs to be in the mess.
In the one pager?
Yeah.
Right, but mostly what I'm hearing is going from one section to the next, make very explicit connection from the promise to therefore what in relation to relevance and rigor, right? What, and therefore we will provide, right? Like
Yeah,
what is it?
right.
And so
If
we
this is what
need
we're- yeah.
which we had at one point, some kind of a linked sentence. I'm not remembering what it was, but we took it out. Partly because we're too many words, right? We're trying to, but yeah, I can see that there has to be a connector, and therefore, and up here, strategic direction, maybe saying, have a little, just a story starter, like a little sentence that says, and therefore, as an organization, we what or something, right? Like what's the something like that. So I get that.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Lori?
I think, I get where you're going with this, and I think what you just said about, as educators, we're the worst marketers, but because, this is how we think, because it's such a big, learning is huge. I think it's different audiences too, right? I mean, I think your one pager is probably, most of your staff, I'm guessing, most of your teachers are gonna take the time to read more than the one pager. And so all of that supporting stuff that's gonna speak to the educators is in the portion that I was saying earlier, if I put my kindergarten parent hat on, feels so overwhelming, is the part that is actually gonna resonate with your academic staff, right? Versus as a parent, I read it, and, you know, I can read it now and I can be like, oh, okay, I get it, I know this language, I speak this language now because I've learned to speak this language over the last several years. But as a kindergarten parent, I didn't know this language that you were speaking in the long version. And in fact, therefore, if I think then reflect back on what I would have been like, I'm overwhelmed by, you know, clearly that emotion. But I think for the one pager, it's a little different than when we're talking about the website, because the website does allow you that peel and onion in real time, versus the one pager. I really do think there is something to what Sylvia is saying about the marketing appeal. And I guess where I go to is like what I know to be true of my own children's school, but also as I'm making my site visits and I hear at other schools, there's something to this notion of curb appeal, where if you look at your school and it's got old chipping paint, you associate that differently with the learning environment than even if the inside of the classrooms have been modernized, but the outside of the school hasn't been painted. There's something to that curb appeal that influences the way that you reflect on the learning taking place inside, even though it has nothing, the paint on the outside has nothing to do with the learning taking place inside, right? So I almost feel like if this is to reach that target audience of parents, the curb appeal needs to be for the target audience of parents. And I hear what you're saying about it, but by the same token, I think the curb appeal for parents is probably a little bit more accessible and filtered rather than these really big ideas.
And I just want to say, I actually agree with that 100%, and with what both of you are saying. I'm just questioning what document is it? And I would suggest that maybe it's the next exercise, which is a graphic with the 6 core words that speaks to them, that grabs them. That is, it could either be in the center of it or of some way as
So we
well.
have more than one
but
at a
it's a
glance,
little
is what you're
different from
saying?
trying to capture what dozens, hundreds of people have been telling us from various perspectives. Like you said, right, this is a document that is bridging, hey, what did kids tell us? What are parents telling us? What did we hear from community members? What are staff saying about it? It is so big and broad that that's what this is right now attempting to do from our focus and flares, right? That's kind of the big picture. How do you distill it in a way that it still says something to a reader? And I'm not saying it's perfect by any means, so let's keep working on it. But I have to ask whether it's not, until we have something that really is a one-page picture of it, it's going to be hard, I think, for it to serve the purpose of reaching the parent or anybody,
Wasn't
right?
there one of your examples had a 3-layer rather than a 2-layer, right?
This
So-
is this one. So
Okay,
what,
so-
yeah, so one of the things that,
I like this.
the
Santa
gra-
Clara's is good, I think.
yeah, the graphic in Santa Clara is the rising above. So it's sort of like that meaningful, challenging, inspiring with a picture. Most strategic plans actually have a little bit more to it, similar to the Blue School, where you've got some words that pop out. What Santa Clara's done is they've got 2 levels, and one, I think Sylvia goes back, maybe more aligned to that marketing piece. That's less words on the page, you know, a splash of information, and then it goes into, and actually I have a hard copy example that I can send around. It goes into a more detailed document similar to the at a glance that we're showing. It's just a different layout. There it is. That I believe was one of their mailers, and so we can pass that around. But I do agree with Craig. I said, you know, once we get to what this is going to look like, then we can determine, okay, how do we market it? And maybe we work with Sylvia on what would that look like? What are the different levels and layers of marketing that we would want to consider as we move through this in the fall?
I guess picking up on what both you and what Dr. Baker just said in terms of the documents, I go back to the fundamentals of why do you even want a strategic plan to begin with, right? And I think one of the biggest challenges in running any big organization, a school district or corporation, is getting that alignment, right? Because what happens every day is there are thousands of decisions being made all the time at different levels. And I think one of the hardest things to do is make sure all the decisions point you to the same direction. And so for me, the reason why we're doing this to begin with is so that we're all making decisions that move towards the same direction. And to that end, I see this as more, you know, if I have to pick the audience, it's really it's really going to be the educators, who work in the district, right? Parents are interested, and taxpayers maybe, but probably not, right? And so I think to Dr. Baker's point, I wasn't thinking this is what we sent out to the families. It'd probably be something like this, right? If you think about like Apple, right? I mean, you never see their internal strategic plan on how that iPad got put together. That's their business, right? And what they show is that glossy brochure with a guy in a swimsuit or something, so something artistic. So I had to imagine, I guess I was always thinking we would have actually multiple takes at this. And this is really an internal document, because we're a public, agency, so we make this available to the public. But this is not what I would sell on. I would sell on this. But so I guess I'm sort of pushing for having enough details and organization in here so people who read this can make the right decisions. If I do this or that, or that we're all on the same page. So that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah, I think the one nuance I'd say, because I do agree with that wholeheartedly, there is something about, for me, it's in order to have the alignment, but with ownership of all the stakeholders. And so you do want it, you want all the parents that came to conversations, all the kids, anybody who talked with us about this and going through the process, staff and everybody said, oh yeah, I see myself in that, and it feels good that we have owned that and that's where we're headed, right? So there is this added layer of it being more than internal in that sense, that it really is saying, hey, did we capture what is our hopes for our children and our school districts so that we can move forward in some way? And I think that's part of the challenge, is it is a little bit more than that. But what I would say is that I feel like there's a whole other marketing campaign that goes with this that will help us reach various audiences in the right way. But you're right, for me, it really is about the alignment. And frankly, it's about having some provocative statements that steps back from who we are today as schools and says maybe schools aren't today providing all that we should for our kids. And therefore, let's be a little provocative, because right now the reality is we haven't really defined, what do we mean by personalized learning when it comes down to how I teach in a classroom? How do I really pull that off? What does that mean? So it's aspirational. And this is what I meant about it is so hard to have a simple document that captures all of that need and purpose in it. So hopefully we're getting there slowly but surely. Yeah.
I think I want to also make clear that I'm not saying that this needs to be a marketing thing, because I think it's about messaging too, right? It's not just the marketing and the glossiness and the pictures and stuff, but I think messaging, we need to be able to message who we are succinctly, and this is not succinct. But I don't disagree with any of the content. I think the content here is great. But I think we should do the work of trying to see, of all of these words, which three.
Yeah, I actually think it'll be good to that end that an exercise we do maybe next time is that elevator speech because that can be really good to go from, so we have all of this, if we forced ourselves, right, and there's all sorts of activities around how you do that, or the 6 word, and there's all sorts of ways. Those will be good exercises for us to do to try to get it to the next level, I think. In addition to, as you're saying, there's ways we can just make this more accessible and understandable at the quick surface level. Yeah.
Anything else? Anything else you'd like us to talk about?
No, I think to tag on to what Craig was saying, I think the next step, that elevator speech, the 6 words, is similar to the portrait promise top 5 that I think we shift to another conversation. And then the only thing, just be thinking about graphics and thinking about what would capture your eye. We have a bunch of samples that you can come look at and give us input. We did want to highlight the samples that came from our steering committee group. We asked them to sort of, what would you lift off the page? What would that graphic look like? These probably would not be the graphics that we would land on, but it was so interesting to see the different ways that they represented our strategic plan. So we thought, you know, at some point in time, we'll have a conversation about graphics, but just listening to each table group talk about, you know, what jumped off the page to them, how it could be a dynamic environment. So they're fun to look at, and either Sylvia, Jerry, or Allison or myself could walk you through them and just, explain what they were thinking. But I don't think we'll get into that today either. So I think we're good.
Okay, anything else, board members? Everybody's good? Nothing more to say? If you have something more to say, these are the people to communicate with, so, all right. Okay, so moving on, is there anything else you guys have on strategic plan?
No.
Okay, thank you. So we're moving on to LCAP.
Yes.
1 minute. So I'm just going to pull up my slides. Okay, so we have been taking the LCAP in pieces this year and trying to help make our journey in the drafting phase visible to you so that we can get ready for that big document that will be coming in the public hearing on May 23rd. So today, we thought it would be helpful to just run through kind of an overview of the actions and the metrics that are in the draft, and also give you an opportunity to provide some feedback, ask some questions, get a sense of where we're headed in the drafting process, and share anything that you want us to consider as we're going through that process. It is still in process. It's quite a big lift to get all these boxes filled in this document. I know you looked at the current LCAP, so you have a sense of that. And then, of course, every year there are revisions and additional templates and more boxes to be filled in. So we are furiously working on that. We're posting the initial draft tomorrow, but I just want to let you know up front, it's not going to be totally finished because we're still, trying to get all of those pieces in. But we wanted to add in this process, the meeting last time, and the early draft before public hearing, which isn't the traditional flow, but just wanting to try to make it more visible and give you a sense of where it's headed so we can capture your feedback early on. Along the way. So I'll highlight as we go forward the areas that we know won't be done by the time we post tomorrow and give you a sense of how we're going to get to that finish line as we go forward. And so today we're at that high level summary, and I'm hoping to capture any questions and comments that you have, knowing that we wouldn't be today diving into, how are we implementing all these actions and what will that look like? Those pieces, if you have questions about that, I'd be happy to meet with you. We can talk through it. But we're really at that high level of kind of what is the scope of this work under each goal area, and trying to pave the way for you to see those connections in that longer document. So in addition to the overall feedback and questions in those areas, we also thought it would be a good opportunity for you to have a chance to discuss any highlights in terms of innovations, connections between LCAP, SIPSA, and the emerging strategic plan that you're noticing. We know that we're in transition this year in this alignment process, and that will continue as we implement the strategic plan. So just calling out where we see that alignment already happening and where we know that we're still in process with that. So I just listed the overall goal, remembering that goal 1 last year, 2 and 3 were collapsed into goal 1. So this is that first section of your summary document. I brought a paper copy just to maybe make it a little easier as well. Goal 1 is that academic success and whole child goal, which is the first section. And in the document, when you see the actual LCAP, there's a section that says it's annual updates. What have we been doing and what will we continue doing in the next set of actions? So in any LCAP, we have actions that are carrying forward and then new actions. So I tried to highlight that in the summary document as well under each goal area. So I think I'll just give a quick overview of all the goals to orient us to this, and then we can dive in with your discussion and comments if that's okay. So we had goal 1, which is really goal 1, 2, and 3, academic success in the whole child. And then we skipped to goal 4, which is about school climate. Goal 5 is that HR goal about supporting staff. And then goal 6 are parent and community partnerships. And we'll come back to what we're still working on. I'll talk through these things, but I wanted to give you a chance to give feedback or ask questions about any of the actions that are listed, either continuing or new.
I have a question. And I can talk to you, Stacy, about this offline, but it has to do with professional development for instructional assistants. One of the things we heard from that union was that they were concerned that there seems to be a disconnect between that and what the teachers are getting, and there seems the plan for how to provide professional development for the IAs was not clear, is kind of what we heard, right, Lori? Is that kind of what? Yeah. So anyway, I can talk to you about that another time, but it's a question that I do have. Anybody else?
One question,
Satish.
yeah, one question is like when going through SIPSAS, like some of the school goals and stuff like that. And I know that we put everything, finally it gets into LCAP, right? So I think some of the goals, they have set it based on certain assumptions, for example, in terms of staffing, in terms of supporting staff and everything. And while talking to principal, one school, they mentioned that, oh, I'm assuming certain things, if any of the changes in the level of staff support, let's say you're moving a specific staff to something else, a supporting staff, this goal will not be met. So how do we tackle that?
So I think I'm just going to restate what I think you're asking so I can make sure I understand. So are we talking about like support staff, and we have changes in how the support staff is laid out over year to year?
Okay, so for example, the goals are being set right now, and there is a set of staff, let's say a psychologist or a instructional assistant, or that kind of supporting staff, right? So this goal is for next year, and the principal, he is aware that there could be a change in the level of support what district is going to give on that. So when mentioning itself, like, by he's sure that, like, if let's say goal 2 or goal 3, it's not going to be happening if there is a change. He's connecting a dependency on that.
Yes.
So you are making a goal by assuming, or currently everything is great, but this may not happen if there is a change. So there's a dependency they're linking into that. So how do we address from a district perspective,
Yes. Well, I think one thing that we want to keep in mind is just that there's a moment in the spring where we are setting the goals for the year ahead, but we also expect that there will be some shifts. So in the spring, the goal setting, the staffing allocations, how staff will be shared across schools, all of those conversations are happening. And then we go into the year knowing what our plan is, but also that any element of the plan could be shifting. So even though there's a moment where we're approving the plans and setting things, it is adjusted along the way, and there's a place in both the LCAP and the SIPSA where we address what those adjustments were during the action part of the plan. So we might say, more support was needed in this area and this is how it occurred, or we didn't end up spending these funds because we shifted the way we addressed this. So, in terms of, we're avoiding, I think, any big disconnects because our directors are in contact with principals. I know HR has been working with the principals and the budget office, so we're trying to get as clear of a picture as we possibly can, but also knowing that it is the nature of things that things tend to shift along the way, and sometimes we do need to adjust.
I'm sorry, I was out of the room at the time, but I don't know if you provided the context and reminder just about the goals, because LCAP goals are not singular to a year, right? I mean, it's multi-year, so all we're doing is actually adjusting them, and I don't know if that's relevant, but I feel like, the sense right now in discussing it is that the goals are set now for next year, but they're adjusted now, and where we are, I just wonder if you could give a little history, because where are we in the process? We're going to reset
Right.
in a
yes.
year from now to get
Yes,
it all
exactly.
aligned to the strategic plan, to the SIPSs, and all of that together, and we're actually at the end of that
Yes, we
cycle,
are.
right?
I thought you were referring to the SIPSA goals, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, but what my understanding is SIPSA goal are, everything is finally funneled through, that's what LCAP is again, right?
Yes.
Because that's the foundation for getting our goals here, whatever we are setting, is all kind of fed from different schools in a way, right?
Yes,
Or why,
yes.
I think it's that way, it is from bottom up, right? It's not like from top to bottom.
Kind of, the district is providing that guidance and direction, which will be eventually in the form of our strategic plan, but also trying to lift up the ideas from the site so that everything is working together. And as Craig was saying, the LCAP it's a 3-year plan that's updated every year. So this is actually the 3rd year going into this LCAP is the 3rd year of a 3-year plan. So it's actually perfect timing to reset next year once we have the strategic plan in place. So the goals have carried forward with, slight modifications as we discussed last time. And yes, the SIPSAs call out which LCAP goal does this connect with, and that's how we, see that alignment.
Yeah, and the SIPSA is unique in that way because it lives both in that bottom-up approach. It lives at the bottom, but it informs our LCAP and our reflection on strategic plan, but it also then aligns itself
Yeah.
to those documents. So it does live in 2 places. It's a little more dynamic in that sense, but that's because it's a year by year thing. It gets changed every single year. It's not a 3-year set like the LCAP is, let alone a 5-year and beyond for a strategic plan.
Yeah, I think one place that I see that happening right now is the focus on school climate. All of the
I was
SEL.
about to say
Yeah.
that, yeah, school climate, this is the place, so the connectivity is there. Actually, this is, we have a goal on LCAP, and schools are building the goal based on that, right? So they have a heavy dependency on some of the things. So at least 2 places I heard this as part of the visit. While they were doing SIPSA, they have, as exactly you said, that the connectivity with our goals, they're saying there's a dependency here, kind of, right?
Yes, and that's a shift this year, and we've been working with the principals to think beyond the CASP data. So adding in school climate goals, which we see is in the LCAP, but it's also showing up really strongly in the emerging strategic plan. I mean, that's a place where I think we're starting to see that alignment, and it is something that there's so much energy at the school level around school climate and PBIS and social emotional learning. So it's really that natural fit that we're hoping for, where we see it as an important guiding direction, and there's a lot of energy and work happening at the school level from kind of lifting up what's working.
But last on this, in the same context, funding of some of this, the supporting organizations like PTA, PTO kind of organizations. In SIPSA goals, they have a dependency on that, some cases. Like for example, 20,000 PTA will donate for doing this, okay? And that is documented. So, if in the event they don't do it, what happens, kind of, right? So, because this is all connected to our goals. And I don't know whether we should be really, when they are setting the goal, whether we should be looking into such things. It's great if they're supporting us, it's fine. Otherwise, we cannot have a goal based on some of the assumptions that, an external party would be giving so much money or funding, kind of. My thought on it.
It is okay if we don't end up doing everything that we say we're going to do in the plan, as
Okay.
long as we explain it. There's a section, because it's a public accountability document, both of these are, so we have to say what we intend to do, how we intend to fund it and measure it, and then we can adjust that as long as we explain the reasoning and what was adjusted in both SIPSA and LCAP. So if a school thought they were going to have $20,000 to support something and then that didn't happen, for whatever reason, it would just be explained, and that's okay. Yeah.
Okay, anything else, Lori?
So the one on provide under goal 1, provide leveled library materials to support differentiation for middle school libraries at $5,000 per site and elementary at $5 per student. Do we have some sort of, so our 2 middle schools who are, have the highest numbers of our impacted kids are also our smallest middle school and our largest middle school. but do we have some sort of fallback if like a large middle school came to you and said, 5,000, we've gotten our leveled library materials, but we're finding it's not enough? Do we have some sort of discretionary fund where we can make sure there's,
Additional library
to make
funds?
sure, to make sure that if our smallest school and our largest school are getting the same amount, that we're really making sure needs are met there?
So this is the bucket that we use for library funds, so this is a carryover action, so I would need to check on why we're doing it per school and in the middle schools,
enough.
but per site at the elementary, so I can ask about that.
Great.
Yeah.
Standard that isn't totally about.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm fine with that. The Elevate Math Summer School, I know we exchanged a previous email. I just want to make sure that stays on our radar for seeing if we can increase our spots in the following cycle for next time. Because we had more numbers of students who would qualify than we have spots available with the partnership with, is it SVEF? So,
Yes, I know we're intending to increase it a little bit, and I can look at that.
I mean,
and send you that
ideally, any
info.
student who would make themselves available for it, we'd be able to offer it for, right?
I would have to check on the capacity, and then also the funding, we'd have to be
Yeah.
able to fund it.
Yeah, okay. And this is more of a big picture question, and I guess what I'm asking for is for maybe Dr. Baker and for Jeff to help me understand. Is it standard, or is it because of our unique predicament with our funding, that we have so many of our key instructional directors funded out of our LCAP? Is that what most districts do, or it makes me nervous that so many of our key ed services leaders are in this year-to-year cycle of this pot of money, when so many of our projects extend multi-year in terms of what we're asking of them to do. And is that something that is unique to us because of the way we're funded, or is that the way most districts fund their key directors?
Well, the key, I do want to say that I'm not totally sure what's meant by key directors, but when we went to the model.
Well, so any of your directors are key, but
Right.
yeah.
But when we went to this model and the ones that are primarily in there, we realized that so much of their work is in fact supporting intervention, MTSS, and I mean, that's one of the reasons we went to that bent and just said we
Okay.
don't want them just being generically directors.
Okay.
They are supporting everybody, but it is with a real focus on the MTSS
And the
model.
achievement gap and the- yeah.
That said, we won't, and I'll let Jeff chime in too, but we won't get away from the reality that we are unique.
Yeah.
We are absolutely unique, and we can count on these dollars for ongoing, but I will tell you, we are taking a long, hard look at what are the things we're assigning to the unduplicated count dollars or supplemental dollars, and trying to take a look at, are we in some way supplanting things that are actually within the general fund? And so we will constantly be, we just talked about the other day, we're going to keep reviewing it. And I think you will see change over time with what bucket of money is funding what program to make sure that we are really aligned to who we are as an organization. And that is our goal. And I will be honest and say we are, in fact, unique, do it somewhat uniquely because we are unique in funding and the situation that we're in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not meant as a criticism, it's really just
No,
a
I
question of,
hear you.
yeah.
I think it's a great question.
Okay, and then to finish off my goal one questions, the pot of money that we're making available to our schools for their SEL, so 5,000 per elementary school, 15,000 per middle school, is that a separate bucket from the SIP funds that we're providing to sites, and will it continue to be?
It was for this current year, and it's planned to be a separate allocation for next school year.
Thank you. I'll pass to a colleague and then come back if there's time.
All right, I'll go next here, I guess. So first, I actually do really want to thank you for putting this together. When I first started looking at this, I started feeling bad for myself having to read all this, and then thought I should feel bad for the person who had to put it together. So even worse. So thank you. I have a number of things. I'll try to hit some of the high-level stuff. I guess 2 comments on sort of formatting. One is, I wonder, rather than bullet points for the items, if we can number them, it makes it a lot easier to refer to. And then for the actions, some of them are district-wide while others are targeted at specific school or schools. And I was wondering if those could be somehow clustered to get just so easier to, when I'm sort of browsing through it. So there's just some maybe requests or suggestions in the formatting. I guess one top-level question is for Goal 1. I know we collapsed 3 goals into that, and it's about academic success and development of the whole child. And I was wondering why that wasn't 2 different goals, because when I looked at the actions, I felt like I could see this serves that and this serves that. And so was there a reason for collapsing them into one rather than just having 2 disparate goals? I was wondering if you could comment on the, I know probably a way back, but what was the thinking on that?
Sure, I think we did it last year.
Yeah. I
Just
can
last year? Oh.
Give it a go since I wasn't here, but reading through it, and then colleagues, you can help me. I think this is one of the places where we're in a little bit of transition, right? There was kind of this consolidation that happened last year to kind of refocus to match the board priorities on maintaining that focus on student success, both academic and whole child. So that showed up in this new Goal 1. But we still have pieces of that whole child goal, in the school climate goal. So it's not really clean yet because we're at the 3rd year of this 3-year cycle with revisions along the way. But when we redo it the following year, we can sort that out and make the alignment a little more
Okay,
clear, I think.
right.
Does anybody
So
want
it's
to
a-
add anything to that?
Okay.
When
so-
you see the other template, you'll see that there are the columns from the prior 2 years. So we have to kind of show the carry through over the last 3 years, which is why we can't totally reorder the whole thing right now.
I see. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
And it will
Sounds
be
good.
different moving forward. 'cause
Forward,
we're
right,
At the
I-
end of our
it's a
3 years,
transition.
so we're just in perfect shape in terms of a strategic plan and all the work we've been doing to finally, have, it'll make more sense going
Sure.
forward.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just wasn't sure, and that makes perfect sense. I just wasn't sure if there was something behind the organization that I should have picked up, but it sounds like that's, which just in transition, it's fine.
Yes, and
All right.
you will see action numbers in the actual LCAP document. When we get to the full document, it will, it has sections where it says the goal and then the action number, and then you'll be able to see, although the template is a little hard to read, but some will say for all students and some will
Oh,
say for
for-
students in specific categories or specific schools. So, we can see maybe at the end of that big process, if we need something like this after we're done and we're sure it's set, I could redo this and make like kind of the cheat sheet or something. We'll see how you
Enough,
feel.
yeah. It's fine. I have some other things, but I think what I'll do, I'll send you an email. These are basically, does this item belong, this goal or that goal? But we can, if we have time, we can cover it. But I'll yield the floor for now so we can get to the other ones. Thank you.
Thanks, Jerry. Sylvia, do you have something?
Yeah, so I've met with 4 of my SIPSAs, and there's a couple things that have emerged, that have been like common things among all 4 of them, and the big thing was professional development for the teachers, but it wasn't so much about that, this is important, but how does it operationally happen? And substitute shortage was a big thing, and so I'm wondering, as we're looking at Goal 5, is there a way to maybe put an emphasis on, I don't know if like substitute recruitment isn't like something that we can add to it, or also like sometimes there's professional training and it's all happening at the same time, and so like if there's a way to stagger it somehow, stop me from getting too in the weeds here, but like it was just something that came up over and over again, that the principals had to then be the ones subbing in the classroom in order to let their teacher go to those, or because multiple schools were asking for subs at the same time because the training was happening at the same time, then like they couldn't, or like there was 2 different trainings happening at the same time, and so one school, they had to choose between one training or the other because they couldn't do both. So if we're saying that professional development is important to us and that we want our teachers to have it, we need to create an infrastructure that allows them to do that,
Thank you. Yes, we can add an action that speaks to that. Yeah.
And it is, in fact, we have
Yeah.
set that as something we're going to do, so we might as well
Yeah.
put it in the.
We are doing some of those things ongoing, but we should call it out. I like
Yeah,
that.
especially when, and I believe it is we hear it when we go to EC meetings at school, so it's a very common thing, and we are planning to do something, so it should be reflected, I think. Yeah.
And then my other issue, I think, was the intervention specialists and MTSS as it's being rolled out at a couple different schools and it's new. What kind of, because we've taken away some of those positions, how are we us helping the administrators at each of these sites to roll out MTSS when we're, from a human resource point of view, not giving them necessarily the resources that they need to do it? So I don't know how to reflect that here, but like we say in the new goal, develop a district intervention team, add the 1.5 FT, which is great. I guess, how do we make sure that it's allocated, not necessarily evenly, because I know we need to give it to the ones that need it more, but somehow can we reflect that will provide the support that the administrators need to carry out their SIPSAs when it comes to intervention with Tier 1 and Tier 2. This is what I've been hearing
Yes.
as I've been meeting.
Us too, yeah.
Okay.
So I think that's happening in a variety of different ways. One way that I feel really excited to dig into is we have taken a look at what is happening with our early readers and the data that we have, local data, how the kids are doing on their reading assessment in the K2 grades. And we've also looked at the demographics of the school and where our kids who generate LCFF funding are located across the district, across all schools. And we have invited principals, intervention teachers, other staff members from the district team to join me for a conversation about what will this district intervention team look like, given the resources that we have, where are our biggest needs based on data, and how will we structure what we have and what we plan to add to best meet the needs of the kids. We have some really phenomenal practices happening that we can see are effective based on the data. And so we also want to give an opportunity for those teachers doing that work across the district to connect. So connecting what we're already doing, but also reframing how could we work together and think about this as a group of kids and a district improvement cycle around what is our theory of action around how can we help them improve, what are we doing about it, is it working, how do we know, and really building those collaborative conversations. So we actually have a meeting coming up this month for what we believe are our highest needs schools based on the data. So that includes the principal at Eisenhower. We know that the teacher on special assignment was reduced at that site, for example. So there are other sites, though, that have high needs also, and taking a look at what is our data telling us, what can we do with the resources that we have. Our team has been researching through our MTSS team, through professional development. Joe and John have been working with an inquiry team, taking a look at, along with a group of principals, what are some additional diagnostics that we can bring in, as we mentioned when we talked about the low performing students block grant. So for schools that are not in that immediate high need category, every school needs to have a plan for how they support their readers who are still emerging in competencies. So bringing in new diagnostics, sharing what is happening now, bringing in new tools. We're looking at a variety of things, and some we will more directly support, and some it will be through those collaborative conversations with the principals and our MTSS team. It's going to take time. We need to build what we mean by Tier 2. That isn't something that we have in place right now, except at a couple of schools that have been getting funds, DeVargas and Nimitz, over time through LCAP. So this is not a one-year thing, but I think we're on a good path to set up that network to move the work forward.
One of the things that, on the subject of professional development, kind of piggybacking on what Sylvia said, I've made no secret of my feeling about teachers being in classrooms. So I'm wondering if, I know we have a budget crunch, but I'm wondering if we're doing anything in exploring, can we pay teachers more to come back in the summer? One of the things we heard from the union was that childcare is an issue, and sometimes they don't make enough money to pay the childcare, so they choose not to come. Some teachers will never choose to come in the summer, but I'm wondering if there is any way we can eke out some budget money for a little more incentive to do that.
Did we discuss that?
Yes, I know Stephen's been thinking about that, so I haven't gotten an update from him, but I know we're thinking about it, and Lynn is busy organizing all the homegrown, summer PD for teachers that want to take that on to prepare for units of study, and definitely, we can keep thinking about that.
Funds to support that.
Yeah, great, thank you. Anything else?
Yeah.
Satish?
I have a quick question on community engagement. We have a 0.5 FTE. So, what is this role, and is it good enough, or is it too much, or is it good enough, or how did that 0.5 FTE for community goal 6?
6.
The last bullet in goal 6 in this page.
That one is going to be reframed. It's not a 0.5 comes from the LCFF supplemental, and then the other part of the position, I believe, comes from general fund. Is
And
what,
it will be in the 1920 action, it will say 1.0 in LCAP, yeah.
so it is,
So
it is a full person,
It's a whole person.
yes. Yes.
Yeah.
It's not a half a person.
Yeah, I think it's me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
0.5,
Yeah, I think it's me,
Leslie
Oh,
says
it's
it.
you?
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, it's Leslie, all right.
okay.
So we'll have some clarification on that, yeah.
Anything else, board, on LCAP?
Okay, you look like you have a
Jerry
lot
and
of-
then Lori, okay.
I'll go first. She looks like she has a lot of stuff. Sorry. No, no, it's good. I'm glad you do that. It's less work for me. So in terms of the metrics, we have a number of new metrics for 1920. I was wondering if you could comment a bit about how they came about, why we decided to do these new metrics, the process under which that they were chosen. There's a
Yes. So, one of the things that we'd been working with the principals on was broadening our definition of success, as part of these bigger conversations. So, wanting to make a priority of using our local assessments in reading and eventually in writing as we're getting our data set and ready to go. That's really an important piece because we know that it is the closest to the kids learning, right? If we wait for CASP, then the kids are incoming fourth graders and above. So, all of those years prior to that, we're not measuring as a district, although we know, of course, schools and teachers are all the time, every day. But wanting to bring in local data, broaden the measures for that reason, because from a formative point of view and taking action on the data as close to the learning moment as possible is really critical, not waiting until so much time has gone by, right?
Makes sense.
And also knowing that we value not just the academic learning, but the social emotional pieces, bringing in the California Healthy Kids Survey to reflect where we see priorities emerging in the strategic plan felt important also. And that's also part of, excuse me, the Swiss program is part of MTSS. Since we're talking about this, I'll also say that, in working with our county team and, we're always updating what goes in the LCAP every year. I know that we'll be adding additional new measures. Some of them are just requirements that go into the LCAP, things that we've already reported to you, like the condition of our school facilities or the percentage of appropriately credentialed teachers. So you'll see some of those data pieces that'll probably be familiar to you, but are not on this list. One that I did want to call out is that within CASP, we're making a transition to the California dashboard. So in all of the measures, and especially in CASP, we have new ways that we can look at that. So all districts are kind of migrating this dashboard to match the California dashboard as well. So an example that I wanted to call out about that is we've traditionally reported percentage of proficient when we look at CASP, which is an important measure. But in the next draft, I also added in something that's part of the dashboard, which is called distance from standard. And so that, what's important about that is it's showing growth. It's a growth model, so not just proficient or not, but how far above or below the proficient mark is a student group. So you can see even when we're way above, high percentage of kids meeting standard, are they improving as a student group? So, in our kind of district, we want to focus on, all kids all the time, and it's not just about getting to proficient, right? It's that improvement model. So those pieces you'll see in the next draft as well.
And then just one more then on goal 5, the HR one. So it looks like, when I look at the continuing actions, I agree with these, and a lot of these I think are around really attracting and retention of staff, and it's really that new goal that explicitly ties to strategic plan by through these collaborative development networks. I just wanted to see if that was sort of a correct reading of this, because it seems like a lot of, if we weren't doing the strategic plan, we weren't doing the portrait of the learner, all those actions in the HR goal we would still want to do, right? So I sort of saw, oh, here's one to try to retain staff, and then we were adding this new action to sort of tie to the portrait. Is that a correct reading, or?
Yes, and also we've been gathering input along the way. So when you see the LCAP document, you'll see the stakeholder input piece. And so this is another, I think, place where we see that alignment happening, is that we know we want this, strategically we want this, and also our staff members have been asking for it. More choice in professional development, more time to connect together over time on a topic that they're interested in learning about. So it's both. Yeah.
Thank you. Right.
Lori?
So on the, I think it's 4. Where did I go here? Papers. So I'm going to skip to the end of the new modified actions where it says develop a set of quantitative and qualitative tools to help assess each school's progress so that we can identify the needs and distribute equitably across the district to areas of highest need. But then on the front side, the first bullet is additional SEL supports for schools with higher needs. Do we clearly know right now if our schools with our higher needs populations also have higher numbers of student discipline referrals? Or is that still like work in progress? Is that a discussion for another time?
Yeah, I think that, historically in the document, we have identified higher needs, I think, in a variety of ways, and it's an area that I think we can improve upon in terms of how we're measuring that as we're going further into things like PBIS and a focus on social emotional learning. We have opportunities to consider how we're assessing those needs and how we're making progress towards those goals. And so, we haven't had, I think, my colleagues can jump in, but there hasn't been an easy way to figure that out, really, because we haven't had kind of a dashboard metric on that, right? So we're doing the best that we can given the information that we have each year. So where we are with that is kind of carrying forward where we have traditionally given more support for next year in that area, but knowing that as we go forward into the strategic plan and knowing that we want to measure how these things are going, to know that we need to really look at what is our kind of set of dashboard tools beyond the LCAP just for ourselves. How do we know, and how will we use that information to direct resources?
So I'm quite sure with all the work we're doing on MTSS, you guys are going to bring that back to us anyway, so I'll just add a +1 that I'd love to see that as a discussion at some point next year with the work that you guys are doing. And then on the measures, there's the measure of percentage of ELL and low SES students in advanced math classes in grades 6 and 8 will reflect the percent of ELL and low SES in CUSD. And can you help me understand, so like when I think about that, I think about comparing to our population that's not identified as low SESS or ELL, and let's say, I'm totally off the top of my head, so excuse me if I'm wrong. Let's say 65% of our students are somewhere, are in one of our advanced math tracks right now. But we're saying that our goal is only for 14% of our identified students to be in a,
So
am I
this,
missing something there?
well, I'll share my thinking on that and then we can see. This is a goal that's been in place for a few years and it is, I think, connected to access. So there, we don't want to have a gap between a group within our population and the group that is accessing advanced material, right? So.
Yeah, you've got me with access.
Yeah,
Okay, you're good.
and it's in the board policy, it calls that out, right? So
Okay.
we're actually significantly below this goal. I'll just say, when you see it's, like maybe 1% or something that we're actually seeing now. So it's a good time, as we've revised the course pathways and the how we're giving kids access, to see what impact we have
That's a
in that
great point,
area,
the shift we
right?
made. Okay.
The 2 out of the 3 measures is one of the things that I want to see if it has an impact. So before it was you had to meet all criteria in the math in 6th grade, but we shifted to 2 out of the 3, and this is one factor to look at.
You may tell me it's almost the same answer then, so my other one was the new measure for local reading assessments. It would seem then that what we're setting ourselves up for there with that reading one is to measure the impact of what's to come with our adoption of Reader's Workshop. So
Yeah, and
I don't want to spend any more time on it, that totally clears it for me,
Yeah.
thank you. I mean, unless you have something else you want to share there, I'm so sorry.
Stop talking.
Yeah, no, I don't want to waste anybody's time, so if you
Yeah.
have anything else you want to share.
just that in the future, I mean, I think it should be the June measure, right? I put winter in because that's what we have, but really it should be an end-of-year measure.
Okay.
Because a lot of kids spring forward at that time of the year.
Absolutely. Yeah. Anything else on the LCAP? Well, our timing is great. If we've got another question or two, that would be great. Sylvia? No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I think, so as I'm listening to some of the questions being asked, it brings to mind one thing that we wanted to do as a district, which was to be more collaborative, and kind of the whole idea of we're all in it together, 25 schools, one district. And as I'm looking at funding Project Cornerstone, because this has come up at several of the schools that I've been meeting with, some schools do it really well, some schools are really struggling to get it going. And so I don't know if this can be reflected in LCAP or not, but something where we as a district, not just funding it, but also committed to helping the schools start it, and whether that's a collaborative thing. So I don't know if that's like a community engagement thing, where we say there's a Project Cornerstone champion at each school. Maybe as a district, we can have a meeting. Stop me if this is like too detailed, but like somewhere where it's reflected that because we want to be collaborative, because we want to not just let each. Right now, the sense I'm getting from the principals is we kind of give them these directives and then it's up to them to like execute it. Can we somehow, if we're really trying to be all in it together, can we provide the support at the district level with things like Project Cornerstone or MTSS or whatever, so that there's more actual support happening?
And I think one of the things with Project Cornerstone, or any of them, is that schools have chosen programs that fit their community. The Project Cornerstone, is certainly accessible to all schools, and I think Allison's MTSS team is helping with that. I think it would be interesting to see, is there something we can do in regards to community engagement and partnerships for schools that say, that would really be a fit for us, but with our community, we need to look at it differently or have different resources and support, because it's so highly run by those parent guest readers, and some communities don't have access or don't have parents that step forward to do that. So I think that's something that either from my history in regards to parent engagement and what's been in place and what John and Joe are doing, and I think really it's a conversation with staff or school site staff to say, is this something you'd like to get up and going, and what are the barriers, and how do we help alleviate some of those barriers and challenges?
I think it's a
even-
broader question
Yeah,
though, right? I mean, this
yeah.
is about the,
Yeah,
it gets in it together, equity of resource and all
Right.
those. We are moving toward that. I don't think there's much we can do right now relative to the current LCAP necessarily, but it will get reflected in everything we do going forward. Because, you know, we're building the coalition, we will be talking about, well, who does what for social emotional learning? Is that something maybe the district could help pick up as a way to share so that some schools don't have more than others? That is absolutely on the table. I don't think, though, at this point it has risen to, and therefore in the LCAP we're going to do blank. But I do think that going forward, we'll be able to address, I think, a little bit better that question of equitable distribution of resource beyond what we're doing right now.
I think what I'm thinking is there's a way to almost kill two birds with one stone, in that if we can share some of those resources, it also simultaneously helps us be more collaborative and see us more as one district. And is there a way to somehow then reflect that in the LCAP?
One thing that I think is connected to that is we've been talking with the principals about wanting the SIPSA to be the real goals they're working on and to have it be a meaningful improvement document. And we have talked with them about building kind of these collaborative networks among principals next year and using some of our principal meeting time to help them connect with others who share similar goals. So at the last principals meeting, we helped them find each other. You know, what are other people writing in their SIPSAs? Who is doing similar work as you, so that we can cluster them through over the course of next year to talk about how are we living out that goal? What are you doing? How about you? How is that impacting, you know, what we're going after for kids? So I think this is going to be a good opportunity to do that in that way as well.
Okay, then we are moving on to board and superintendent activity. Who'd like to start?
I don't have anything to share.
Okay,
I had two visits, school visits, last week and early this week, and cherry blossom, so it was pretty good.
okay, yeah, good. Sylvia?
I had hot lunch at Miller, and I had the mini cheeseburger sliders, and they were not bad.
And you're here today.
Yeah. And, you know, I very much enjoyed my frozen peach cup, so, but it was, yeah, that was cool. I actually met the lead cafeteria worker, Shaman, at Miller. She's been here since like 1986, so it was kind of amazing.
Yeah,
Like,
well experienced,
yeah,
yeah.
it's cool.
Good, okay, Lori?
So I'll just skip right to the big one, which was I attended the CUSD 25 Coalition kickoff first meeting on Monday night. It was well attended. It was an enthusiastic crowd. It is, you know, big picture wise, we all know some sticky and tough stuff that group is going to work through, and I think everybody in the space really embraced being there. It doesn't mean that you know, that we're going to snap our fingers and everybody's going to be all in overnight, but I think it was a great first meeting for what it was, and I think that it can only build from there. So, you know, just letting you know that was kind of a momentous milestone for us to get through, and I think if I compare it to my expectations and some of my fears about what it could have been, it was awesome. So,
Good.
for our first meeting.
Great. And I am also on that committee, but I missed Monday night's meeting, so appreciate the feedback. And I've been continuing with school visits, and I've only done one SIPSA meeting, but I have the other 4 in the next couple of weeks. So by the time we do our report, which I think is on May 23rd, we're going to be reporting on what we saw and heard in the SIPSas. And I think we're going to get some sort of a template for that to kind of guide our, yeah, okay. So that's all I have. Are we ready to adjourn? We're done.